I do too. I like that too.
Well, we'd like to welcome everyone tonight to the, is that on? To the Planning Commission meeting. We'd like to begin tonight by saying a Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please rise and join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We traditionally start our meetings with a legislative thought or prayer, sometimes both. We've got a couple of thoughts here which may be appropriate for this evening. First is from Socrates. By far the greatest and most admirable form of wisdom is that needed to plan and beautify cities and human communities. Wow. I hope that we have some wisdom here tonight. And the other is from a gentleman by the name of Edward T. McMahon. I don't think this is the Ed McMahon that's on the Tonight Show, by the way. That's a different Ed McMahon. But Edward T. McMahon said this: "Growth is inevitable and desirable, but destruction of community character is not. The question is not whether your part of the world is going to change. The question is how." And that's what we're all about here tonight. And I'd like to start with just a brief prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we bow our heads before Thee tonight, and we give Thee thanks for the opportunity of being here, of being part of this community, of having the opportunity to work with our neighbors and friends in developing plans for the city. We're thankful for the many blessings that we receive here, for the peace that we enjoy here, and pray that Thou will continue to bless our community. We ask that Thou will bless us this night, that we may discuss those things that are needful, that we may understand the role that we have as planning commissioners and as citizens, and that we may discuss openly and understand one another clearly. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. Typically, we review our minutes from previous meeting at this time, but because of the nature of the meetings that we've got planned tonight, we'll postpone the review of the minutes until the end of the meeting. And so the first item on the agenda has been scheduled for a public meeting. It has to do with the Parish Creek Final Subdivision located at 1030 North, 950 West. This time we'll consider the proposed final subdivision application for the Parish Creek Business Park, and turn the time over to staff.
Thank you, Commissioners. All right, so this is the final subdivision plat for Parish Creek, and not a lot has changed since the preliminary subdivision. They still have a few things in progress to submit to the city, including an updated soils report and some protective covenants and CC&Rs for the architectural integrity of the project. But they did want to keep this moving so they can move it to City Council as soon as possible. And they promised to get all those things submitted before the plat is recorded. Another thing that kind of slipped under the radar while I was writing my report is they are doing a boundary line adjustment on the southern line. So that will have to be recorded with the county before the plat is finalized. And those were the big concerns from preliminary. Still working on a few things before City Council and the recording of the plat, but no new concerns have been brought up since then.
And they're not changing the lot configuration on this at all, right?
There was kind of just a gap in the boundary line on the southern line between the two properties. So that's just being accounted for in the new boundary line adjustment.
So are they adjusting to the south, or? Yeah,
I think they're gaining a few feet, but it doesn't belong to either of the neighbors. It's just kind of an unaccounted for piece of land in between the two property lines.
So are they splitting it, or is one party taking all of
it? Parish Creek is taking all of it, yeah. Because the ones on the south line all line up really nicely. And then Parish Creek starts a little bit north of that. And so it wouldn't make sense to make the property lines to the south go jagged when they can just take it over.
If I'm correct, the lots south of it are in the Hogan Park subdivision, so that's a fixed point at this stage.
Okay. Other questions for the,
Yeah, we had on the initial site plan a walkway, and there was some issue with like going over the wetlands, and there was a bridge, and there were some questions about where that was going to end up.
Yep, so as of right now, they still have the pedestrian pathway connecting to 1250.
I can't see that. Where is that?
It's not on the subdivision because it's not a part of it. That's like the site plan
Okay.
part of it. So this is just dividing the lots into 4.
So how did they resolve that issue with the?
They have a box culvert, and they have it in their plans as of right now. And then they're still communicating with the Hogan properties because it will have to go through a little corner of their property. So they're still in communication with that. And
Yeah, and the city's been working with UDOT to use their right-of-way to make that connection, so.
To
it's
make the
still-
connection to
it's still
1250.
It's still in flux on the condition of your final site plan approval.
is it anticipated that there be some sort of a subdivision note or condition on the subdivision relative to the pedestrian walkway?
Yeah, I believe they can address it, they're putting it within the easement areas, and then, I'm not sure the agreement with Hogan and UDOT yet, how that will play out.
So I don't see it as a condition in this. Is it?
it's just subject to the PDO. And so the site plan amenities are
Yeah, this
subject to the PDO.
This will be a private, it's basically their private walk through the project.
So it would be a condition to the PDO?
It is a condition of
Yes.
the
It is already.
PDO,
Yeah.
and it's a condition of your final site plan
Yeah.
approval. And they're still working on those details, and as they come to conclusion on how that's working out, then we'll eventually know a final answer.
So if anything were to change drastically on that, they would come back for a PDO amendment to reconsider their final site
So
plan.
it'll just stay with what they said for their preliminary site plan, and unless
their
Their final site
their
plan.
final site
Yeah.
plan. Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions for staff? If the applicant's here, invite the applicant to come forward at this time, if they have any comments. Okay. This matter's been scheduled for a public hearing. We'll open the matter up for public hearing at this time. If anyone would like to come forward and discuss this matter at this time. Seeing no one rushing forward, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Further discussion with staff or the applicant? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the final subdivision plat for the Parish Creek Business Park located at 1030 North, 950 West, subject to the conditions 1 through 6 listed in the staff's report, with the suggested reasons for the action A through C.
Do we need to also add a 7th condition with regard to the recording of that sliver of property?
Sure, yes.
Yes.
Would you entertain a friendly amendment?
Yes. That would be
So
great.
the 7th condition would be, well, actually, Dave, will you help me with the language here? That they need to have the,
Boundary line agreement relating to the strip on the south portion of the subdivision be recorded.
Yes.
Prior to final approval. Did you get
I
that
will
okay, Katie?
I'll second that with the 7th.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further debate or discussion? If not, we'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. I think you nodded yes when I asked Katie if you got that okay.
Yeah, I'll just re-listen to it.
And by the way, welcome. It's nice to have you back at the commission.
Welcome.
Okay, the next matter on the agenda is a public meeting, really kind of a work meeting, and I must say that we had some debate last time about how we would conduct a work meeting, because typically what we like to do is set up tables down below the dais, roll up our sleeves, loosen our ties a little bit, and get to work. But because there was quite a bit of interest in having this meeting televised, which it is, the only way that the camera could find us all and we could properly get recorded on the record, we're going to have to stay up here. But nonetheless, consider ourselves with our sleeves rolled up and our ties loosened, and we're ready to go to work. So the purpose for this item is to elicit comments from property owners and business owners along Pages Lane. We've been discussing now for the past several weeks possible general plan amendments, possible zoning amendments that may impact future development of that area. And of course, it's very important to us that we hear from citizens, property owners, business owners, and other interested parties. We, as the Commission knows, and probably most here know, we did hold a public forum where we invited the public to come forward and give some input. And I could turn a little bit of time over to staff to sort of set the stage as to what's gone on in the past and what we'd like to do moving forward with this session. So, turn it over to staff.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the audience and those who are participating know that we've met a couple of times since that public forum as a commission and discussed a number of issues. I think in generalization, being really macro view, 30,000 foot level, the questions is it's a commercial area. It's experienced at least 5 years of some vacancies. I know there's been a lot of effort by some property owners to market and try to see where that could go and whether commercial is viable. The city's also had some tentative discussions about, even a long time ago, should we redevelop this area? What could we do? Is a redevelopment agency option there? A lot of those preliminary ideas have not really fruited to much in taking place. We did receive an application for a portion of this property as we were going into this larger process. Brighton Homes submitted an idea, a proposal of redeveloping some residential in a portion of the property. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what side you're viewing it from, we were already in this larger process that was noticed back in November. We did carry Brighton Homes' application through the process with the commission and the city council because they did pay for a right to petition the government for some changes. That petition was ultimately denied at the council level. I don't think it was denied as if this is a bad idea. I think there was out of respect that there was this larger process already underway, and I think there was on the Planning Commission and City Council at least some consideration that residential redevelopment is a possibility, but we're not ready to act on the specific proposal of Brighton. So that's why they denied it, was they wanted this larger process to ensue. So we held the public forum. We received a lot of comment. I think there is bleed over from cemetery space during that public comment. The city is tagging, not a part of this process, but in conjunction, there's been discussion of the cemetery running out of space. It has. There are no longer plots in that area. So there was some input from the public wanting cemetery space. Some of that said Pages Lane might be an option to look to. There was also discussion in some of that public forum as could Island View Park, which was previously talked about as a potential expansion site, Could that still be really converted to a cemetery and maybe replace the acreage or something of that effect over at Pages Lane? But there was, and there's no decisions on that. The cemetery space is somewhat related to city and development matters, but it's more complex to talk about cemetery expansion. You know, the issue is the city willing to stay in that process? There's certainly some public interest to stay in that process. The council's still wrestling with that. But we did want to recognize in the public forum, particularly the Planning Commission wanted to recognize that a park may be an idea to talk about in the redevelopment of Pages Lane. And we had some, we sent out kind of what we've got in a generalized bubble diagram to all of you to talk about that. These are not hard and fast scenarios. It's more of an illustration to receive feedback. There's some that just says, you know, maybe we just do a park and commercial might still be viable, so leave the commercial in place as a whole, but maybe secure some of it for a park. And that's a big question. You know, acquisition, city's general fund, its programs and capital improvements, is the council there? But part of this process is still to look at what the possibilities are, brainstorm about those possibilities, and then make some recommendations so that they can further explore those ideas. So the first top scenario is just saying leaving it commercial, but maybe we do a neighborhood park. That's not hard and fast. It's just our parks, if you average our neighborhood parks, we have a really small one and kind of a larger one. So if you average it out, it's about 3 acres, but I don't, 3 acres is the magic number. It could be 2.5, it could be 2, it could be 6 if that's something everybody wanted. But obviously the size of the park would be an issue, but we did evaluate some preliminary ideas about a 3-acre park. The middle scenario up there is really talking about maybe we do go to residential redevelopment, but the feasibility of a park may be an issue because it does cost and some expenditures. And so an idea thrown out on the table is if we do convert to residential development is required to provide its open space for the residents in the area. So an example is a multifamily development. If it was multifamily, the minimum requirement in city ordinances is 40% of that land is open space for yards, front yards, backyards, and common areas are required as part of a multifamily development. So could some of that required open space be a partnership with a future residential development? And what would the partnership idea be? Preliminary is talking about residential development generates just over $2,000 per unit in an impact fee. It's not necessarily a big bank of money depending on the density that's applied, but maybe some of that could be returned as part of that partnership, as well as maybe other ideas on the table. And so that's why the smaller green in the middle is maybe a more of a partnership. The third one is driven out of the idea that we received some feedback that don't discount commercial, but maybe the amount of commercial is maybe all of it's not developed in commercial. So the idea is develop some as a residential, but maybe preserve some as commercial. So the illustrations, corner properties are like gold, for lack of better terms. People like those. So the illustration is just saying maybe we reserve some commercial still and convert the rest to residential and still do a park. Or it might even be that the park's not feasible and we just convert some of it residential and leave some of it commercial. So the commission just wanted the feedback direct from the property owners. We sent out notices. I think there were 29 notices sent out. And we did try to invite the Village on Main, which I believe they're here tonight. And so thank you for coming. And really, Chair, you guide the meeting. This is the time for staff to sit back and let the sleeves go up and talk about it.
Very good. Thank you, Corey, for that introduction. So at this point, we would really like to open this up for discussion because we would like to get this on the record. We'd ask whoever would like to speak to it to come to one of the mics and state your name and what property you're involved with if you are. And that would be helpful for us as commissioners to know kind of where you're coming from. We would like your input on this or anything else relating to this portion of the Pages Lane site. We recognize that you know, the entire block is kind of it's not really in play here, but it is important that it be considered because it is part of an overall neighborhood, and we recognize that Desert Industries is likely not going anywhere anytime soon. Nor will the ones down on Main Street be changing, we don't believe. But we do believe that they have input certainly in what we discussed tonight, and would certainly appreciate any comments from them. So anyone who would like to start out, welcome you to the podium.
My name's Rock Weininger, and I'm involved with everything you got highlighted there. I just got to begin by expressing an appreciation for you good folks, for many that have supported those businesses there for so many years. It's been my livelihood. It's made it possible for me to raise a family, and it's been awesome because we've employed a lot of people. It's fun to see the history of what happened there. Our dad, Uncle Dick, our dad and Uncle Dick bought that property 70, might even have been 80 years ago, and stuck their necks out and have been really successful there for a lot of years. And we appreciate the good people of Centerville who have supported that, as well as Bountiful also. And if nothing comes out of this, at least you know that we're sincere with that and a great appreciation. We wish this could be so. We have some handful of renters in there now. Leases are coming up, and it's this perfect storm to be able to do something. We've done some damage because this has become an option to like the Bridge Church and some of the other renters that are there. Probably some damage has been done that's going to be hard to repair, and it kind of breaks our heart. We thought that what Brighton Homes' plans was a beautiful scenario to take up the asphalt, eliminate the semis and the trailers, the empty parking lots that are abused and very much beat up. We spent a lot of money repairing those parking lots with very little income. That property there is our retirement. It's what we've got to live on, and if we lose the rest of those renters, you know, we're not sure what we will do. Property tax is astronomical, and that is a struggle every year to be able to pay those property taxes. In our opinion, there's two options. Those three are not part of them. The first option is that we're just going to plug away. We're going to work with Brighton Home, with Bridge Church, encourage and help and be involved with them. They're great people, and they just have a wonderful congregation, and they're sweet people. There we also have an insurance building and a nail place. We make a little money from them and enough to pay our property tax and do a little maintenance. We replaced half of a roof, and it's getting down to where maybe we need to do the other half, which will take a full year's income, along with, between that and property tax, it pretty well takes a full year's income from that property. So we're left with just plugging away. I noticed semis park in there at night. Trailers are in there at night. I don't know if you guys live around there. There is no landscaping to speak of except the old Zions Bank. I apologize. It's a little hard on me when redevelopment money has come out to help our renters leave. The theater was awesome when it was there. Dick's Market was awesome when it was there. Zions Bank was awesome when it was there. My opinion is the property is well worn out. We've had a great run of 60 years. I appreciate, so that's one option we have. We just plug away. We've talked about maybe trying to use indoor storage with some of those big buildings, which doesn't improve anything. It doesn't add any grass. It doesn't make anything beautiful. All it does is bring in trucks and trailers and storage units, and that's kind of what we're down to. I appreciate, and so the second scenario is Brighton Homes. They have it under contract with us. So with city approval, it could be rezoned and they could move ahead. It would make it beautiful. It would change the landscape of that area. It would bring a lot of greenery. I'm sure they've come up with a couple different ideas to meet, what you're requesting. I'm grateful for the Brighton home type of construction and homes. Out of my 5 children, 2 of them use those kind of homes because they can afford them and they move into them. And I appreciate people like Brighton Homes that makes that available to our new young marrieds or even those that have retired and want to scale down, have a little less driveway, a little less landscaping. The city park and all of that is wonderful, and if you want to make us an offer to buy it, to put a city park, I would suggest we hurry because it is a perfect storm for us. Dick's Market sits empty. We have our leases coming up, and the property will be available. If we step forward with Bridge Church, sign another long-term lease, which is exactly what we will do, another long-term lease with Bridge Church, which makes it so another 5 years, another 10 years goes by, and we have that big, ugly, black parking lot will not change. I know to you it's just another project in the city, but to us it's our livelihood. It's who we are, and it's how we make a living. It's time sensitive, as I mentioned, because it is a perfect storm for us with the empty buildings, which we're going to try at this point. If Brighton Homes doesn't work, we'll move forward. Again, I want to express my appreciation to you. I know it's a hard job, and I admire you in doing it, and grateful for good people like you. I couldn't help but notice the picture of my uncle that was the mayor. I was at West Bountiful the other day and looked at the pictures of 2 of my grandpas, one on the Argyle side and one on the Weininger side, that did the same things. And I'm grateful, and with all the sincerity of my heart. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can we have discussion back and forth with?
Yes, I think
Yeah.
we can. So if you've got questions for Mr. Weininger.
If you, yeah, definitely.
Let's ask some questions and we can
So
discuss.
when you say sort of it's a perfect storm and it's kind of the right time, what is the time frame right now with like leases coming due and all of with Brighton Homes? Like, what are we talking about as far as that for you?
Of course, Dick's Market's empty. Bridge Church's lease is up September of 2018, right? So 1 year. The insurance, he's month to month, and the nail cottage there is month to month.
Okay. And then how long is the Brighton contract with you? Is it?
Tomorrow.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, this has all gone on way longer than, you know, our first thought was, wow, this is going to be nice. This will change the landscape of that big black parking lot. If we don't do it now, I think another 10 years will go by. I really do. And that's somebody that's been in the business my whole life.
Right. Unless there's another offer of redevelopment. from
But if
another
we sign
company or
additional
something.
leases,
Right, that's true.
then that becomes the problem. And that will be our goal beginning tomorrow if Brighton Homes doesn't extend their offer, because
Right.
it runs out tomorrow. If they don't extend it, our goal, Bridge Church has already asked for additional space. The Nell Cottage has asked for additional space. And the dry cleaner up on the top corner wants the whole corner there. So all of that would come together. Dirk, am I?
Have you been in contact with Bridge Community about them exploring other options at all?
Dirk, can you answer that?
Bridge Church.
Could you give us your name? Could you give us your name for the record?
Dirk Weiniger. I'm Rock's brother. Bridge Church made us an offer on the horseshoe. We call it horseshoe, which is just the center part. They wanted to take that whole thing. They offered us a buyout on that. And they wanted to move into the Edelweiss business, which is the next one to them, because they have the whole east side of that horseshoe right now. And our problem right now is we can't put any new tenants in because of our contract with Brighton Homes, and we can't extend any existing tenants into other parts. And I have had some interest in the theater, the old Pages Lane Theater. You know, it's just more or less just quick temporary things, you know, not a long term. But I really feel like we could get that thing going again if this doesn't work, and that would be our goal, to do that and turn it back into a good commercial thriving business area.
Okay.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question, maybe, or well, just kind of to help understand the dynamic of this area here. So there's 5 parcels here, right? And some of them are owned by Weiniger Brothers and some are owned by Deka. So maybe you could talk about that, and they're not all contiguous, right? Because I think there's the horseshoe and then what used to be Domino's Pizza. And
yeah, we have 3 properties there that are, one is the Domino's. We own this Domino's and the dry cleaner. And like Rock mentioned, the dry cleaner wants to go into the Domino's building right now. And I've just been putting him off, just saying, you know, and he's doing really well. He's thriving in this corner. And Zion's Bank, we've always had trouble. We've had a couple tenants that haven't lasted very long in there. We have some problems with electrical and the plumbing and the heating, which is been a problem, but it can all be fixed. The Bridge Church rents this whole piece down to here, and then they want to go into this piece here. So they are our anchor right now. The nail salon, Sparkling Nails, is right here, and they want to go into the old Silver Creek Clogger right now. And I've been putting them off. And we have insurance guy right on the end. So we make a little money after our expenses with it.
And we have the old theater.
We own the theater, and we call this the school, which was the part of the theater at the time.
And then
this is all the Dick's Market there. So.
And we've been in contact with Marv Blosh. He's been here before. He's out of town. And we represent him with the Dick's Market pretty much the same way. They have not had any opportunities to lease that. Marv is hoping that Marv has a business in St. George where he has indoor storage. That would be his goal if this doesn't work out, to turn Dick's Market into indoor storage.
Just so you, Marv sent an email, and it's been forwarded to the commission, so.
Does Marv own the Ace also?
Yes.
Okay, up and then through the old dentist office?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the ACE lease is.
Theirs is the 5 acres from here to here. Ours is the 3-point-something acres with this and
All of that.
this.
And-
Okay.
and-
That makes the
And Zion's, right?
8 acres or whatever.
Okay.
So, as I understand it, the Ace Hardware, they're already under a long-term lease, right?
That's what Marv had said, that they have a long-term lease. Colonial Lumber has a long-term lease
Right.
there.
Thanks for that explanation.
Thank you. Sure, please come forward. Either one is fine.
Is that a church on the far east end, or it used to be a church?
Give us your name, please.
Oh, yeah, my name is Garth Hare, and my wife and I own the property straight across the street to the north.
This is the Bridge Church right here.
I'm talking about on the far east end. Isn't there a church out there too?
Across the street.
There's a church over here.
No. Right on the very end of the property, after the Ace Hardware. Isn't there another church over there someplace?
No.
That used to be a church once? I think there was one. But it's not now? Okay.
And where do you live?
I live in the other end of Centerville, but we have some apartments, those 2 fourplexes straight across the street right there. Yeah. I had a couple more questions. Should I go ahead with those?
Yes, please.
So that building to the east is vacant then, is that right? Oh. If any of these plans came together, would Ace Hardware be easy to get out, or would they have to be stuck there until their lease runs out?
As I understand from our conversation with Marv a month ago, is that it will not be, they will be staying.
No matter what happens?
And you know, I mean, he's also a developer. I mean,
So if
you
you
don't
had,
know, he might think a business is not good enough to stay, but at this time, he has a long-term lease.
if you had that home project in there, he's gonna be stuck in the middle of all that?
Well, it won't really be in the middle. It'll just be done from here over, I think is what your plan is.
Oh, I see.
So from this point over, as we see Brighton Homes' plan is what they've got in mind.
Well, I was wanting to ask too, since trucks are parking in there, do you charge them for their space? You should do that. And then you'd get some benefit from it, and it'll also give you some control over.
I don't know if we, if with our commercial zoning that we can do that, can we?
Corey, just plug your ears real quick.
Actually, we don't want them in there.
That's what I mean.
This
If you-
was never designed for big semis.
If you charge them, then they won't come anymore. That's what I'm saying. That's kind of a way around that, a question anyway. I had a couple of other thoughts. Sounds like the cemetery's not really gonna be a very popular idea, is that right?
Well,
It may not be a popular idea with property holders, and that's what we're here to figure out
I
right now.
think it'd be a great idea.
I think it is actually a popular idea. I don't know that a lot of people have fully considered the cost of something like that.
Right.
so.
Well, and you were saying the city may want to get out of the cemetery business? Is that what you're saying?
Well, let me say that so I don't get misquoted. We've run out of space, and as I understand it, so this is not a perfect knowledge. As I understand it, the city looked at expanding the cemetery on the west end by doing that retaining wall system, and there was a lot of opposition to doing that.
Because of the cost?
Cost and the height of the wall was an issue. So there's still, the city council, as I understand it, I wouldn't call it tabled, but they've paused on the cemetery issue.
Oh, I see.
And I think that will come back into discussion as they decide whether they want to expand the cemetery. So not in the cemetery business, there's a value that the city has to say, do we want more cemetery space? And if so, where should it be and how should it be developed?
I see.
You know, I mean, obviously that if it comes to fruition that that's not something everybody wants to support, then obviously we've run out of space. So I don't want to say we're not interested in the business. It's just a difficult place to decide whether we want to continue and how should we continue.
Well, it's an interesting way to have park space because people pay for those little plots and it's pretty expensive. So it would pay back to the city for doing that. Only it takes a lot of years to purchase all that space up, 6 foot by 6 foot. But anyway, as a neighbor, I think a cemetery is a real fine option if that's what everybody wanted to do. Had no opposition to that at all. On the other cemetery, instead of a single retaining wall, have they considered like a terrace type, 2 or 3 steps with some space in between each one?
Yeah, they're evaluating with the engineer and discussing whether a shorter wall or tiering. There's maintenance issues, equipment access issues to mow. So I don't think any final decision has come as of yet.
Well, I guess just basically then is this, if we're trying to figure out if we would be opposed to having a cemetery here, we wouldn't be opposed to it. There's a school down there. I don't know if that's a problem, having children crossing through and stuff like that, walking to and from school. Speaking of parks, there's a lot of open space, green space there behind the school and next to that church just to the north. I'm not saying that because I don't think we need any more green space. I think we always like green space. And that'd be one of the benefits of a cemetery. You get green space and it pays for it, and it pays money back. I had a couple other thoughts. I originally was thinking it might be a good location for the fire station, but it sounds like they've already cited that. Is that correct?
Not sure.
Yeah, I think they're underway in where they're headed. You'd have to contact the city manager on how far they are in the process, but I think they've made some substantial strides on where they might want to locate.
Anyway, that's a good location, and it's plenty big because they did want a bigger space, and there'd still be room there for I don't know, there's still plenty of green space and a fire station, which being a metro, interagency metro, Davis County Metro, it will be serving not only Centerville but also Bountiful, so there's benefits that way as far as access and availability to either city. Another thought I had was, I mentioned last night a woman came up here and spoke on another subject. One of the things she mentioned, which was kind of unrelated, was that she wishes there was a grocery store back there. And there's a lot of people who've mentioned that to me. Our renters have said that many times, that if there was a grocery store, they would use it. And it also, here again, it could serve Bountiful and Centerville. I know you you wouldn't want to have another Dick's there probably, but and it needs to be a store that would attract a customer base that's different from Walmart and them. But I was thinking like a Trader Joe's or that type of grocery store, that it has specialty items, but it also sells bread and milk and all the basics. And it could be a smaller one or a larger one. Some of those Trader Joe's really pull in the customers, and they also have good revenues from there. Another thought would be, you know, there's a Mercedes dealership over there in Farmington now. We could have a BMW Volvo dealership here. And that would be, it's not green space, not necessarily. They do usually get put lawns around. But it does have the effect of classing up the area quite a bit because they usually glitz it up a lot. And that would also maybe attract some positive parking people rather than trucks and stuff. You'd have BMWs parked out there all the time, and that'd be good. That'd be good. Another thought would be one of those dual restaurants, you know, like they always have the Red Lobster and what's that Italian restaurant called? Red Lobster and Olive Gardens side by side. You could have a Kentucky Fried Chicken and A&W in there, something like that. So those are a couple of thoughts I had. I had one other thought too. There's a farm back this side. Would they be interested in expanding back into that area that used to be farm ground once before? It wouldn't generate a lot of income for the city necessarily, but it definitely would be open space, and it would have would be productive. I know several people that grew up around there. Well, there's some fields just due south of that property, right there. Yeah. Anyway, that's another idea. It's not, you wouldn't look at it as a high lucrative revenue generator, but it would be possibly that farmer, whoever owns that, I don't know, maybe he would like that. Make his business more productive and more profitable. One other thought, I don't know if anybody'd like this idea, probably not, and that is a paintball recreation area or something like that, or a water park or something of that nature that would draw in like entertainment type stuff. So those are the thoughts that kind of gone through our mind. But I think of all of those, the people in the surrounding area have mentioned it numerous times that they wish there was still a grocery store there, because a lot of them are older and they have to walk or take bus to get to wherever. This woman that came up here the other night says she has to cross 3 different traffic patterns in order to get to the other location of Dick's now. On the subject of the park and so forth, maybe, you know, it's going to cost money to put in a park. And it's just made through my mind back to in the past. You know, 100 years ago, up in Idaho, my grandfather, when he was the mayor of this little bitty farm town out in the middle of southeast Idaho, he and some of the other neighborhood people carried water in 5-gallon buckets to a park which was 2 or 3 acres, full of little trees like this, and they watered them like that by hand for several years until finally an irrigation system was installed. And it reminded me that there's nothing really against us in this city volunteering our time and energy and sometimes even contributions to pay for sod and so forth. We don't have to, we shouldn't expect the city to pay for everything that we got here. Used to be, for example, that all the sports program was totally, completely volunteer. Did you say something? Oh, no. Oh, it must have been the chair squeaking. But if we did want it to be a park and a green space, whether or not there's going to be a developer involved, I think if cost is a factor that's hurting us, we should look real hard at making this a community volunteer input type of affair where not only those who live close around, but all over the place in Centerville invest in it with their own elbow grease and with efforts to make it be something that truly would be a community thing. And that would be a benefit to bring the community together. And I think a lot of things that we have could be done with more volunteer work and less city paying the bills, because we just talked about a 40% tax increase yesterday. And I think a lot of that could be corrected by individual donated time and donated efforts by individuals and companies, corporations, or businesses. But those were the thoughts that I've had and that I've collected from people around the area over the last few months.
Thank you. I have a question for you. With all of the great ideas that you've just expressed to us, I have not heard you weigh in on residential.
Oh, well, I think it'd be all right, just everybody has one stipulation, and that is that it doesn't become a tenement area. It needs to be, you talked about something that was beautiful and attractive, and that would be fine. But if anything where it's packed in, like the thing across the street where Penny's used to be, don't want that.
But you wouldn't be opposed to multifamily because you own some right across the street.
Right, and the neighbor just to the west of us is building some townhomes there, and those are all connected together, but he's landscaped it in such a way that it's probably gonna look fairly spacious there. I would like to see lots with some grass around each house, you know, where there's more than enough room to shimmy between the buildings. So like I say, no tightly packed housing, but housing is a good way to do. And you could have your park be, you could have like a water catch basin to double as a water storage area or a place for runoff, and as a open space for soccer or something like that too, in between the homes. Yeah, that would be, nobody's opposed to that, as long as it's not a high density thing.
Thank you. Other questions? All right. Okay, sure, please, come on up.
Hello, my name is Corey Haddock. I'm a resident here in Centerville. I also work at the Recreation Center here in Bountiful, and I just wanted to throw out a couple options. I don't know the time effect it's going to have or how soon Mr. Weiniger wants to get things done, but the Rec Center is looking at some projects, and we're looking for land, we're looking for space because we don't currently have anything outside of the Rec Center there in Bountiful. And so we're getting a lot of demand for soccer, and we're getting a lot of demand for pool space, we're getting a lot of demand for water parks, we're getting a lot of demand for a lot of these type of recreational opportunities, and we're looking at projects, and we're looking to see if there's some land opportunities that we might be able to procure, or to work with, create partnerships or something like that. So all this is kind of preliminary. It's nothing set in stone. We're just looking at options and wanted to provide maybe an opportunity to look into certain things if people are interested. If Centerville City wants to pursue something with us, or it might be down the road, it might not be immediate, but we're looking at options. So.
Questions for Corey?
When you say pool space, you already have several pools there at the Bountiful Rec Center. Are you looking to build some different type of pool than what you have there?
We're really talking to our members. We'd like to have an outdoor pool, 50-meter outdoor pool. We've also got a lot of feedback from a lot of the members about having maybe like a water park where you have more tube slides and things like that. We're also looking at soccer fields. Currently, we don't own any fields, and so we work with the school district we have interlocal agreements with the school district to provide soccer fields and things like that for the members. So those are some options that we're looking at, trying to acquire space to be able to do that, maintain them on our own, those type of things.
There used to be an outdoor pool where the rec center is now.
Yes, there was.
The big problem with that was they couldn't use it during the winter months, so they put the big bubble over it, and that blew over 2 or 3 times, and they finally gave that up, and eventually this idea of the indoor pools came. Would you just close this pool down every year in the fall?
You know, it just kind of depends on the project and the pricing and kind of what the demand was for it. I know in the summer, we're looking at trying to figure that out, because that's one of our biggest user groups, is people wanting it to go outside and use it during the summer.
Could I propose or suggest a pool that has a cover over it that you can open up in the summer, and not a bubble, but it's a...
We don't like bubbles.
A mechanical, very simple elementary affair that slides across. You've probably seen them.
Yeah.
And they open all the way up so that there's nothing in the way during the summer, but they can come back across, close in, so you can use it in the winter. And
I like it.
There's some people live down the street from me that have one, and I've seen it's been there for 20 or more years, and it looks as good today as it did when they put it in.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Yes, please.
My name is Dave Coker-Hans, and we were invited to attend. I represent the owners of the Village on Main development. We're not Centerville, we're Bountiful, but we're neighbors. And for years, we were concerned about the corner and how blighted it was with the old gas station there. Worked with Dale, the broker, and we started having meetings, and we were inviting the property owners, like the Weiniger brothers and the representatives and others, to come to the Village on Main and have a meeting with us to see what we could do to try and help revitalize. We'd called it the Pages Lane Revitalization Committee, and people, we just invited property owners and the representatives from the church and those that own property there to come and discuss with us. We had Corey come a couple of times, and we were trying for years to see what could be done to help there. And one of the things that we felt we had a little bit of hand in was helping encourage the city to cooperate to get that gas station and the Steak and Shake thing going. And I came and spoke on behalf of the owners and so forth, and encouraged that happen. And it did, and we think it's great. We've as a part of that, we wanted that corner looking much better, because it would help us to try and sell our corner that we've tried to sell for many years. We had that corner under contract with the LDS Church for 4 months this past spring, and then they canceled. They decided not to. We understood it was probably going to be a family search history center. I think many of you may have heard of that, but I think the church decided that maybe that space over there where Joanne's was might be the best. And I don't know, has any of you heard of any progress as far as them going in there?
We only know that the Joanne's lease is coming due, so at that point, there may be something that they do with that.
I think we've heard that rumor, but that's all it's ever been, is a rumor.
And they've approached us on several occasions and had drawings done, and they're doing that all around there.
So they're still looking, but it seemed like, when I have an acquaintance that knows somebody in the presiding bishopric that said, it didn't make any sense to us. They came out and looked at the site and said, why would we want to spend $500,000 to buy that corner when we've got property over here that we could utilize? And so it sounds like that may be the direction they're going. Because, for years, there was a couple of things. I've talked to a commercial appraiser that said to me about 4 or 5 years ago, he said that, the best thing that could be done with that east end of that block is to scrape it and put in some nice residential condos or something that would be nice. And I said, well, that's the same thought I've had, because the highest and best use of that property right now, there just isn't going to be any more commercial probably interested in that. And the reason why I say that is because your representatives have tried, your brokers, we had them come to our meetings, the guys trying to lease out the Dick space, and some of yours, and the old theater space, and they would come and, every 6 months we'd have this meeting. And they would just be discouraged. Hey, we've tried this commercial, we tried to put a call center in there, but there wasn't enough parking. We tried this, we tried that. And every time they, as time went on, they just got really discouraged because everything they were trying, these commercial guys that do this for a living, everything they were trying was failing. It just wasn't working. And, I would talk to them and it sounded like, the day of the highest and best use of that is gone and it needs to be something else. And there, I come from a development background. We built 16 apartment communities from Logan to Las Vegas. And I'm not advocating apartments there, but I really like the condos across the street that's been done. And I'm really excited to hear that Brighton Homes is wanting to do something there because there's a need for housing in this community. And I don't think they would have any trouble at all selling or doing something with what you're planning. I'm not sure all your plans, but to me that really makes a lot of sense. That residential is the way to go, and to redevelop that. And then you've got your green space like you're talking about, and you've got a blighted looking shopping center there that's worn out, and having residential in there would improve the whole community. And I thought, well, if Dick's needed to stay there, Fred Hill's a great guy. We've known him, and he's been a client of ours. Let him move down to the old, Joanne space or something like that if he wanted to. He kind of came in and, I visited with him about that, and he kind of took over that space just because it's a great store. We love it. I love to shop there. So that's a conflict. But if they didn't include that and went the other direction, went west, that would be a great thing. So just from a development standpoint, it really, I'm glad that we were invited to the meeting and be able to kind of give our perspective of it, but we'd love to see some new life in there and do something similar to what they're proposing.
Okay, thank you very
Any
much.
questions?
Questions?
Okay.
I guess I do. As far as the Village on Main, what type of success or difficulties have you had with maintaining commercial? Because I feel like that Skills Fitness or DC now or whatever has been very successful as a good anchor there. But how's everything else?
We would never develop a project like this again with commercial underneath. The brokers told us, wait, you're too far off Main Street for commercial. So up on the north end, we have a very successful daycare center. We have the pediatric dentist and the orthodontist that moved over from, the east end of the block there, and have a beautiful building. And then right just in our main building there next to Skills Fitness, we have a 5,000 square foot daycare. And they're, talking about maybe even expanding into some of the indoor storage space that we have. Very successful. They're doing great. Skills is doing well. And then as you come down, then we have our leasing office, and then you have our corporate offices are in there. And then next to that is the nail salon, and they just pack the people in there. They're doing very well. And then next to that's a hair salon, and we've just brought in a new owner that took over the Lucid Ends, and now it's Lucine, and they're looking to do a little bit of expansion. I've got about 3,000 square feet right now that's vacant. Some of it has never been, 2,000 square feet of it's never been occupied. And we've got a plan right now to build out the remaining vacant space with some executive offices and some storage in the back, and expanding the hair salon, which will basically put us at 100%. And the city's already approved our plan to do that. So retail-wise, yeah, I think we're doing well. And the tenants out on the corner there, Arctic Circle does well, and the credit union I think is doing fine. And the corner's been a big challenge for us because you can't get any access off of Main Street other than what's already there 600 feet south, where the entry is between Arctic Circle and the credit union is the only place UDOT will give us access. So you got that, and then you've got off of Pages Lane as your access points. And it's been very difficult. And then the credit union, when we sold it, drew a line right through diagonally through the lot and said, you can't build anything on that site. And the guys that were representing this allowed them to put it in the purchase agreement, although it's not recorded, but we have a restriction for building on the east side of that lot. So it's made it difficult. We've got some plans, and we've talked to a few different people besides the church, and we're still working on trying to sell that or develop it. Maybe there's a thought of doing some small retail stores along there, that kind of thing. And
How's the residential?
They stay 95% occupied all the time.
Great.
And you've got a good place. Half it's senior, 96 units senior, and 96 family, and it's always done quite well.
Great.
But anyway, so like I said, there's just I think there's a need for people that want to live in this community, and there just isn't housing available. And to have some nice condos or some townhouses like Brighton Homes has done, those kinds of things, and it seems to me the very best way that you could go and just beautify that area over there and make it nice again. So
Fabulous.
Thank you. Yes.
These diagrams here make it look like the Ace Hardware would have to go. Is that right?
Well, what we're looking at now is some general plan work that would be where we'd like to see things go in the future. Ultimately, that lease will expire at some point, and so there could be expansion of whatever we decide, commercial, residential, whatever.
Over the long term.
Right. It's a more long-term approach. Obviously, there could be some short-term things done right now.
Can I say one real quick thing?
Sure.
Rock mentioned that our agreement with Brighton Homes ends tomorrow. Now, I don't know if this project can go through with 5 acres or if it's got to have the whole 8 acres, but we need to make a decision and whether to continue to work with Brighton. But their thing was on their contract with us is that it was in condition of getting the zoning that they needed. Now, this has been 6-7 months ago. Now, so we have kind of got to the point where we really need to know if it's going to be able to be rezoned and whether we should consider going with an extension on this or I heard that it may go till December, which would be disastrous for us. So, thank you.
I appreciate that. And just point of clarification so that we're all on the same page. A zoning change is a legislative function that is ultimately the city council's decision. We can make recommendations and are hopeful that in the relatively near future we'll be able to do that. But your point is well taken. We are trying to move the process along, but it's not ultimately a decision that we're in a position to make. So.
I have a question for you or for Brighton. We've had some other developments around the city and some feedback from residents and from some other people about producing developments that market to baby boomers or to people who want to downsize. Is that, I know that we originally had sort of a plan that was kind of put before for the public open house. Has that changed? Is there sort of any idea to market to that, to have inclusionary zoning, or would it be like, what is the plan right now?
So our original proposal was just that. We had all the units that we showed on our first proposal were all master on the mains, geared or marketed towards retirees. We came back with
this. We
this.
probably ought to get your name for the record.
Sorry, my name's Taylor Spenlove.
Thanks, Taylor.
And they still had stairs, like a second level.
They did. They did. And our experience at Porter Walton, the end units there were master on the main, and those were sold to retirees.
Yeah.
Because they do like they don't have basements over there, and so they like the extra space for when a grandkid visits or they need an office or something like that. Our second proposal that we showed was more in response to feedback that we had received from visiting with different people, and that was the single-family small lot option that we showed. I know it didn't seem like they were large homes, and I don't know if it was clarified very much, but on our presentation, those homes range from 2,700 square feet to 4,000 square feet, just so you know. So we're open to different types. We again, with the Weinigers, we had hoped that we'd have some more clear path by now. It's been, since we submitted our last application, it was early spring, and I feel like the discussion has been stalled at the park, and there hasn't been any further discussion on density or on architectural style or anything like that.
While you're up here, Taylor, just a couple of questions that have been raised tonight, and which I think we've discussed as a commission in the past, and that is, and we don't necessarily drill into your contract, and you don't have to disclose things that you don't feel comfortable with, but we're wondering about this whole situation with the Ace Hardware, the fact that is a long-term lease, and that's something that the Weinigers can't control right now, and indeed none of the owners can at this point without breaking that lease. So does that impact what your plans are, or is there something that we're missing here that deals
No,
with
I mean, we feel comfortable, and I know that a lot of people feel like it's a little awkward to have commercial on one side on the other, but it's a big enough parcel that it's not that awkward, at least in our decision. And remember, I'm the developer. I'm trying to develop the property, so I'm going to have a little bit of bias there. But it's also an infill parcel. You're not dealing with Syracuse, where you have large swaths of property to pick and choose what you want to put where. You're dealing with redevelopment, and so there's always going to be little caveats to how things are redeveloped. The Ace Hardware owner does own, Marv Blaschi owns the grocery store and Ace. Once Ace leaves or their lease is up, we don't know what would happen. And I think that's what Corey has been getting at, is we need to plan what we want here so that if anything does happen to Ace, or they go away, or their lease expires and they don't want to extend, what can happen on that parcel as well, and how is that going to be cohesive to anything else that happens in this area? If the Planning Commission says we want residential here, then it would be expected that on that part of Ace, if it ever got redeveloped, it would be residential, whatever that density is. And how can we incorporate our project or plan our project to better incorporate any future development on that parcel? And we're wanting to and willing to work with that. When it comes to the park situation, we're purchasing property at a commercial value. And I know that it's not a concern to you guys what property costs or what we're buying it for, but to come out and say 3 acres of this is going to be a park, that's a huge expense. And you're basically telling us that we can't develop all 6 acres. I like the idea of using our open space as some sort of partnership where it's open to the public. In some of our recent iterations, we've toyed around with pickleball courts in between our site and the DI that could be used by the retired residents of the community and the community in general. So there's options there, but I feel like we're stuck on this park that staff, and I'm not trying to speak for staff, but they had, it's expensive to build a park, and we haven't even discussed anything else. In the last several months, we've been working on this, and to have an open house and ask the community what they want and say, do you want high residential or a park? Of course they're going to say a park. I mean, if it was in my neighborhood, I'd say a park. And so there's a lot to consider here, and realize that, you know, everybody would love a park, but is it feasible? And what else is there that is feasible?
My question for you is, how are you so patient with Centerville? You come back again and again and again. It's like you're a glutton for punishment. Brighton Homes just comes back, and we keep messing with you.
It's because you have such a great staff to work with. We like this
That's
area.
on the record, Corey.
I mean, I hope I don't get Corey in trouble, but you guys have a great planner, and he really knows what he's talking about. Whether or not you guys or the council listens to him is another story. But my background is, my graduate degree is from the planning and architectural college at the University of Utah. And so I've gone through similar education that Corey has. And his philosophy on planning is very much in line with what I think cities that are close to larger cities that are built out and need redevelopment should be.
You've indicated some recent iterations on your plans. I think it would be interesting to me, maybe the entire commission, to know what densities are you looking at right now to make this work?
So we're still looking at between 6 and 8 units per acre. To do redevelopment, it's not taking a empty piece of property that has no demolition costs, has no current vertical or value to it, structural value to it. And so there is a cost there. If I was developing this on Lund Lane, for example, where there's no structures, it's a lot different than developing it in an old commercial zone. With apartments on north and south of it, that's another thing to consider, is just to the south you have a low-income housing project in Bountiful, and then you have residential 6 to 8 unit per acre properties just to the north of it. And so to pigeonhole the property at 4 units per acre and then have it redeveloped from existing structures, it's almost impossible. And it's more valuable to them to just get month-to-month rents from lousy tenants that may not be there for more than 3 or 4 months than it is to sell it for the costs to actually redevelop the property.
Come on up.
What is the zoning on that farmland along Orchard there?
Boy, I don't know. It's
That's
Bountiful.
Well, that's part of Bountiful City. Okay.
Just
So
that is.
Make that a park.
That's RM 19.
Yeah.
So that's 19 units per acre.
19?
RM 19. And I do know that the owner of that is Earl Tingy, and he is very interested in selling that now.
Other comments, please?
I'm Aaron Roundy, and I own the dry cleaning business up on the corner. And I'm for the third option on the flyer that you sent out. I opened in 2011, and the business is growing. Even when Dick's moved out, which is kind of a killer for a dry cleaning business, I'm still have a good business. I do all the police department for Centerville City stuff, and I don't want to go anywhere. But I appreciate your time, and that's pretty much what I have. I think it will work as commercial if you just get the right type of business up there, you know. But whatever, that's what I have to say.
Great.
Thanks.
Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
What are your, actually, one question. So it sounds like your preference would be for it to be commercial, but what are your thoughts if it were to turn residential? And keeping that corner
I mean, that's
commercial?
not going to hurt me either. I'm just to try to keep my business there, and I want to expand it into where the Domino's was, but with all this stuff going on, it's kind of been put on hold to kind of see how it plays out.
Can I talk to one of the Weinigers? I know, I think we all have heard, and you've mentioned, it's kind of been discussed a little bit, that you've been marketing and Marv's been marketing those areas for obviously a number of years. There were some suggestions on certain things like restaurants or other specialty type stores. Can you just, so that people don't, spread rumors anymore, can you just put on the record kind of a background of some of the things that you've tried to do and or some of the constraints that you've found and Marv has found with that area?
I really appreciate you asking that question because, Zions Bank, it's been 6 years. We've had one renter. And they stayed for 2 months and left in the middle of a lease. We have used every high-end real estate company that's in the state of Utah. We've done everything imaginable from aerial photographs to, you name it, trying to rent those units. It wasn't hard when Dick's was there. That stayed pretty well. We had a pretty good income. Associated Foods bought Dick's Market out, and they, of course, closed that Dick's and has used everything in their power to stop any kind of grocery store to go in there. They're big, they're strong.
Can you kind of explain a little bit more about that?
Well, Associated Foods owns Macy's, Dan's. Our Weinigers is one of the only ones one of the few they haven't bought. The Lee's that's down here. All of the smaller independents that you see through the valley are owned by Associated Foods now. Associated was never that way to begin with. It was always the small retailer owned their own little business, which was really nice because we were in the stores. Yep. Exactly. They bought the Albertson stores. So Associated, of course, had to make a new step, and the reason they had to make that is Kroger came in and bought Smith's. Kroger's had made an offer on Dan's Foods to buy Dan's. Associated saw the writing on the wall that their huge warehouse would begin to shrink in business. So Associated went out and started to buy the independents. And like Dirk said, they bought the Albertsons, which ended up this one. So they had Dick's and Albertsons going. They made a decision at one point to close one of them because they weren't being successful in both of them. So that's why it ended up where it did. And of course, as you know better than anybody, how important that street is and how sad Pages Lane is now. And that's the main reason. We would have done anything in this whole wide world to have a grocery store in there. I promise you, we have made every effort. We would do anything. We would love to have a grocery store there. And we've ran grocery stores our whole lives. Even Associated can keep us from opening it.
How does Associated block some
Well, and you'd have to ask Marv, you'd have to ask my cousins. As I understand, they probably still have a lease on it. That's usually how they hold on to it, and it just sits empty and they leave it empty. The other thing is, if somebody comes in and tries to open that as a grocery store, it would need to be a small retailer. That small retailer would have to go to Associated to be able to get supplies, equipment, and to be able to run that. Associated would turn them down. And as I understand, that has happened on a few occasions. You know, you mentioned some stores. I'm on your side. Man, that would solve our problem there.
Trader Joe's is a whole different concept.
So it would solve our problems, and I know the effort's been made.
And just let me respond to Trader Joe's and Olive Garden. Those corporate, those larger stores, they have parameters that they have to stick to when they make a decision on location. And a lot of these places put a dot on the ground, and then there's a radius. And if the population isn't large enough, they won't go there. The other dynamic is they want to, Olive Gardens, Sizzler, those places, they want a freeway off-ramp.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like he said, they've been marketing it to as many people as they could. And they all go together too. So that's why you see your parish lane so vibrant.
And we kind of learned tonight the Bridge Church wants to build a building and leave, so that will be devastating. That's our strongest renter there. Honestly, that's pretty much the only renter there that holds that together. Without them, we're just kind of begging. Did I answer your question? Did I cover it?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was on the record and that people understood that there's a lot that's been done for that.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak tonight? Well, we really appreciate you all being here. You've given us some great comments and a lot of food for thought. We, as a commission, are very sensitive to the timing issue. But as I indicated earlier, we may not be the final stroke of the pen on this, whatever decision is made, and it does take some time to work through the process. We want to be sensitive to that, and we'll certainly keep that in mind as we move forward.
Mr. Chair, if I can stick my neck way out on the line, I mean, this is sticking it way out on the line, so maybe I shouldn't.
But you're going to anyway.
I'm going to do it anyway because that's what I'm used to. I'm going to go back to this time sensitive. You know, the caveat is there's no way a non-voting member, staff level, can make any representation on what's going to really happen. So I caveat that. But to at least in your private discussions and deciding where you want to go, to have at least the understanding that when Brighton was turned down in the denial, I don't think it was because their project was completely wrong. It's my impression, I think if you went back to the minutes and to the video, I think the city council was interested in Brighton's project. You know, the density is always a moving target right now. It's been for Brighton, it's for us staff planners. As we talk about density, the need for housing, it is definitely a moving target, and wish we could narrow that down more. But I do want to at least say that the purpose and denial of the council was not based on that that's not an option to consider with the property. I think it is was stated in the meeting, kind of quoting, that we do have this larger picture that was in place, and the council did want to allow the planning commission to be the citizen planners and not just jump ahead with Brighton's project. But I think they were entertained with Brighton's idea, but wanted to give time to the commission to put on their citizen planner hats and come up with something. I would agree that the idea of park and cemetery has entered or created a discussion that's created a less surgical strike on the decision, because I do think there's impression that commercial is not something probably as viable. Not saying that some commercial is not viable, but maintaining the whole area commercial is probably not in anybody's interest. And residential conversion to something is a reality. And that's probably about as far as I can go. So I know it's tomorrow, and I can't say hang on, but I can't say that the concept of conversion to residential is even remotely dead either. So
then my question is, should we give them an extension? I know Dirk said, no way, we're done. You know, with what you're saying, I'm thinking, yeah, we should give them an extension. And if so, what kind of time do you think it requires before he's able to move ahead with his dry cleaner?
Yeah, you know, the original target is that by August and September we would have some answers, and that was the idea originally when this started. That this did not start to just go at square one. It really was targeted to go in and start addressing the density issues that this community has complained about in this area. And so that's, I think, the sensitive matter is density and how much. You know, I think if somebody came in at R19 in Brighton, it's probably, you know, or Bountiful with Brighton, it's I would give it nearly a 0% chance. I think the discussion between 4 and 8 units an acre is on the table. There's strong feelings about 8 units an acre. There's also strong feelings that 4 units an acre is acceptable. So I think that range is there. I think the chair and I have been in meetings to talk about we want to move forward. I think the issue that really is at play is there opportunity in the long future of planning a pattern that if it converts to residential, one, it integrates if other uses attrition over time. It doesn't mean that it all develops at one time. It does mean, though, that as attritions, it should relate one to another. And how does that density play out in relating to one another? I think the other issue is we've heard commercial, we've heard pretty loud that there's at least a few users that are viable. And so we don't really necessarily want to just shut the door on that either, because attritioning everything to residential may not be the best way to handle everybody's needs. So I think the park issue, I know the commission's tired of me because I warned them the costs. And, you know, if the park is something that can be looked at, partnership, other issues to come into play to make something work, and how much is still flexible. I think it's still flexible. So I think, you know, December, I don't want it to go to December. I would like to, but I don't want to push the commission in their duties as citizen planners in responding to the community, at least exploring what they've said in the meetings. So hopefully fairly soon, but I wish I could give a date. How's that for non-committal as can be? I guess what I'm saying is the timing is right, and I think it would be a loss if the city doesn't work within that timing either. I think that's not in anybody's best interest.
I had two more or less tangent ideas to throw in here. One is there are a lot of people who have a great interest in this being a beautiful and attractive area. And I don't know if anybody's ever thought of this, but if it were to become a park, is there a venue or a means by which people could bequeath benefits, you know, death from their estate and so forth, to go into a fund to take care of purchase and maintenance of a park on behalf of the city? You know, like how with somebody can will their estate to a university or to some charitable institution, and it becomes tax-free, and they want to do something for the community, was there a way that something like that could be pursued? Because it does cost money to build parks, but that would help to reduce the cost of that, in addition to the donated time and effort, like I mentioned earlier.
You know, creative thinking, it's always welcomed. I think there are kind of two factors in a placement of the park is securing the property and then developing the property.
Well,
and
it'd
I
have
think,
to be coordinated together.
Yeah, and
You couldn't do
I
this
think
here and
I
that
think
there.
in a phasing program where you're developing in a type of phasing and stages is usually something that, as you're talking about, works well in the developing part.
Well, there may not be interest among the individuals of the city.
Right.
On the other hand, there may be great interest. Remember 2 years ago when we had the big windstorm and everyone showed up and they cleaned up the whole city in an afternoon? There is a big, generous compliment to the citizens.
And I do think your idea has some merit. The community park has been is shown as an example of that when people came together. The city did put over about $1 million into that park, though, for the securing of the property. And it was the developing of the property where the citizens came together. So, yeah, I think there's two factors: how to secure the property, how to develop the property, and certainly your idea is one way to phase in development.
Right. The other question was, if the old Dick's building was gone, if it was razed to the ground and gone,
A planner's dream.
would that change the way we look at what we'd want to do to this? Would that change things? I'm just throwing that out as kind of an out-of-the-box brainstorming idea, that if that building were gone, then does that open up our minds to what we need to do and what we should have? And then if it does that, then that might be a step towards getting where we want to be, is figure out a way to get that building gone.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, and this is just my perspective, I think the issue is if there wasn't commercial there, would that change factors? And I would say yes, that certainly changes factors because you're dealing with greenfield development. From my perspective, I know we had this discussion in Walmart, whether Walmart leaves, whether they tear down the building and leave the parking lot. The issue is marginal effect, because just the loss of the structure doesn't change underground drainage, public infrastructure, that all and dirt movement, that's all part of a heavy cost. You know, the shell of the building can be somewhat expensive, but
Does it have asbestos in it?
I hope not, but but in a demolition, they'll have to do the inspection. But to be honest with you, I think just tearing down the walls really doesn't save a lot, because the man hours to go in and take a backhoe and knock a structure down is relatively short. The man hours to haul off asphalt and dispose of it, redrain, regrade, that becomes very costly. And maybe I'm wrong, because I'm not a professional developer.
But
landscaping and drainage is a cost for new property also.
Right, and that's why we're talking about the redevelopment, is that there is more to just the buildings being present to redevelopment. It's partially infrastructure, it's partially the value of the property, and all those are a little bit in flux, you know.
But what I'm hearing, and I appreciate that comment, but what I'm hearing from the property owners is that there has to be a movement first from the city or a developer or someone in order to justify tearing those buildings down, because that's their only source of income right now. And so that's kind of a hypothetical that doesn't go very far. Sure. No, I appreciate the comment very much. Great. Any other comments that anyone would like to make tonight?
Yeah, I would hope that the message, at least the message I got loud and clear, is we need to make a decision pretty quick and send it up to City Council, regardless of how we feel. Personally, in my opinion, as the commission probably knows, the highest and best use, in my opinion, is higher than 8 units an acre. I don't think the city has an appetite for that, but I think that's the highest and best use. I'm glad the Weinigers came. I'm glad we put a face to the property, and it's not just some big, rich, evil developer hoarding in his money and Scrooge McDucking into a pile of gold. That there's people behind this, and the decisions that we make can have a massive negative impact on people and their quality of life. And so I just recommend the commission, no matter what decision we make, to do it quickly.
I'm going to echo that to an extent. I'd like to see an option number 4. From what I've heard tonight, from what I've heard from the citizens, that I agree we need to move forward with this, but it seems to me that, as Corey mentioned earlier, that corner piece on 4th East and Pages is still viable as commercial, and probably we ought to maintain perhaps a commercial foothold of some nature. But on the other hand, the rest of it is likely more suited to residential. I'm inclined to go a little higher density than the 4, but I would like to see enough density so that we can develop a private public participation in some green space as a buffer between residential and desert industries of some nature, whether it's an acre or 2 acres, something that would be so if you combine 3 and 4,
Yeah, take this red, move it up to the middle.
Yeah,
Is that what you're thinking?
You could take the red, leave it on that corner, but I'd basically move the park space from option number 2 down to option number 3 and create an option number 4 where you do have some green space down there.
I see that. That's one matter. I just needed to understand it, so I get it.
But
may I make a comment?
Sure, please come forward.
I'm Sue Weiniger, wife of Rock and sister-in-law to Dirk. Just visiting with a lot of young mothers that live in your community. They have voiced their opinion as I've talked to them about what's happening, and they said, we would like improvements on the existing parks. We don't feel like we need a new park. I've been to those parks with my grandchildren, and Bountiful, North Salt Lake, they don't have the best parks either, and they're starting to improve them. And that's what I foresee as one of the greatest benefits as a city, is to improve the parks that you have. I think the green space with this development would be lovely. I don't know that it needs to be so big. When we look into the future for our children and our grandchildren, will they even be able to have a home? Will they just be renting a small place in a big community? Salt Lake is developing a lot of apartments, and that's just renting, and they will not be able to afford a home. When you have a little more, we're not always eager to build a lot of homes in a small space, but this is your family, this is my family that needs homes. They want to have a place to raise their family in a nice community like Centerville, Bountiful, North Salt Lake, Farmington, and Kaysville. That's why we need to think of the future, who will be here. Not just what's here and now, but after hearing tonight that we will be losing a big renter, it truly will be devastating, because we have worked it and worked it and worked it. I've done janitorial cleaning myself to save money. Our son's doing janitorial work to save us money. And what we do is we have very few renters, but pay through the nose for taxes and taxes and taxes. Our personal money has been being paid taxes to develop this city without enough income to hardly pay. We barely managed to pay our taxes last year. It's over, I feel. And I feel like it's important to think of what the future holds for our children and grandchildren and what we present to the City Council. And it has been many, many months sitting on your tables to make a decision. And we are hoping that you can make that decision soon, so it doesn't drag on and we lose Brighton Homes. We haven't had anyone else come in and say, can we take this whole thing? It will be lost, and the opportunity will be lost, and we could sit with hardly anything left. How does my future look at 58 years old? You know, it's time to make a good decision and change for the future of our families. And we know where commercial wants to be. We never got that freeway entrance that Penny's and the Weininger Properties and others wanted 50 years ago. It didn't happen. So we hung on the best we could. We did well for many years, but it changes. And so we have to be ready for change as well. It's inevitable. Change just happens. And I think in my opinion, it's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this has been very helpful tonight, and I do appreciate all of the comments. I think it would be helpful for us to close the public meeting now. It doesn't mean that you necessarily can't comment, but I'd like to turn the time over to the commission so that we could discuss it among ourselves. You're certainly welcome to stay and listen in to what we have to say, and then we can. We do have some other matters on our agenda tonight that we need to cover, but again, thank you for your comments. And if you do have specific questions based on our discussion among ourselves, let us know, and we'd be happy to open up the public meeting again. So, turning to the commissioners, then we've heard the stakeholders' position on this, and I'd like to just open it up for just general discussion, maybe some direction to staff as to where we go from here.
Can you remind me, Corey, what price the end units with the master on the main for Porter Walton Townhomes were sold at?
Roughly, it was the high 300s, and extras sometimes spilled it
400.
just over 400, if I'm correct. Sure.
Please.
You know better than I do. I'm the best for the rumor mill.
Public meetings back open.
I think the base home on those were low 300s, but most of them were 350 to 400.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sorry.
So I asked that with the potential for redevelopment with residential, knowing that this would be $300,000 to $400,000 homes, which I think is fabulous. I mean, that's great, but I also understand that that's not a starter home, and that's not a home that just anyone can buy. So I think it's important to recognize that residential is needed, specific types of residential is needed, specific price points of residential is needed. And if we're saying that we're providing this service or this opportunity for people to buy homes and then providing it at a cost that is not feasible for people, we're fooling ourselves. So I don't want that to be an argument for us to go forward and say, yes, we're providing this is great, we're doing this for the public good, unless we really are. And if we are, then we have to talk about density, and we have to talk about what type of residential is going to be in there. And if that's a motivating factor for us, then we really need to actually back that up. If it's not a motivating factor for us, and residential is something that we want to see, then yeah, $400,000 homes are fine. But I don't think it's incongruent for us to say $400,000 homes meet the needs of a large swath of people.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. In fact, I think you run into that. I think that's a function of Centerville. I mean, I don't know if you can build much of anything in Centerville that could really be a successful starter home, no matter the type of building. I would argue that the reason you do I would be okay with multifamily. The reason you do residential there is because it's the highest and best use. I would argue from the angle out of respect for the property owner, not necessarily out of respect to meet the needs of children of Centerville. Because as a starter home, I agree. That's a great point. I'd wish $400,000 home. Yeah, that'd be great. But yeah.
And truly, whether you're talking development of commercial, residential, or virtually anything else, you know, the market kind of drives this a little bit, and I don't think we can deal with artificial, you know, reasons. It's like Logan said, the highest and best use is likely residential for a good portion of this property, and the market will take it where it takes it. Brighton is probably in the business, or any developer is in the business of selling homes for what they'll sell for. I think it presents an opportunity for downsizing. It presents an opportunity for more families to stay in the area, but it may not be all families, and it may not be all markets that can be served by this. Other thoughts?
Well, I agree with that. I think the market is going to determine the value, and the market's high. So there are not a lot of beginner homes. My son just barely closed on a home this week in Centerville, and they've been looking and blown away because they're very pricey. So I agree, and I kind of have always thought we needed to have residential there. The park is always intriguing to add to that, so I like some of that space that you mentioned to have something perhaps that does include the public, but I think that east end of that block would be best served that way. I do not support high density there in any way. I think Centerville is far too crowded with, they have one street that goes all the way through Centerville and everything else. So if anything happens, an accident or a horrible snowstorm, I myself have been locked into Centerville, as little as we are, for hours trying to get out. So I just hate the fact of pouring lots of people into a thing, but I could support the 4 to 8, preferably. My preference would be 6, but with that little bit of commercial that's on the corner that's very viable, that also seems that it fits into the community type. It's something that they will still use. So I think I could move forward quickly on the east end of that with some, discussion here.
Other thoughts?
So I'm going to just ask a weird question. So RDA, we decided that was not viable or not a good path to go down. I just want to remind us of why that is.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's definitive. Here's the principle of the RDA. The first element is you're looking at there's a urban renewal, so there's a problem of deterioration, or there's some factor in the property that if not for redevelopment agency help, things would not take place. So that's the base theoretical. It's used in a lot of creative ways, but the principle of redevelopment is that the idea is that you have a base taxable value. It's X today. And if there's a problem or there's a lack of storm drain or it's a deteriorating area, there's a lot of different findings you can come up with. If it's not for the participation of the RDA, it's not likely to develop. So that's your base principle to looking at it. So certainly you could say that the deterioration of over 5 years, somebody could probably come up with a reason and findings that this is somewhat of an urban blight. And so we want to participate into the RDA to encourage something better than what's happening. The concept of that you have to go out now is to the taxing entities. In an RDA, you're approaching all of the taxing entities. And school district is a huge component. They get a couple of votes, and the rest of us, get one. So the school district tends to have a lot of influence on an RDA project. But the concept is that there's a base value, and that value doesn't increase or deteriorates for the long horizon. And if not for the RDA to encourage redevelopment, that tax base deteriorates. the hope is that you'll do a cost-benefit analysis and say, if we change that, what will the tax base increase over time if we incentivize that change and not wait for 40 years? And is that incentive to change and increase, what's the duration it takes to generate amount of money to pay back whatever it is you're trying to accomplish? And I think that's where the struggle is if you look at all the Pages Lane area, 50% of it, or nearly 50%, roughly, is not a tax exempt entity. Right. So now you're looking at the property and its value that's left. What is its value today? And is the new development generate enough benefit that the taxing entity says, yeah, we'll give up some of our taxes for 5 years or a portion of it for 10 years, whatever it might be. We'll give up that increase to incentivize that development so that in 5 or 10 years or 15 years, we've bettered the tax base out of it.
Never going to get that with the park.
And that's the struggle with the RDA is, one, it's already at a commercial value, and how long, what's the cost benefit of redevelopment? Will it create that ability to pay back that need to incentivize? And that's where we think preliminarily staff says not very high, and as Chair Hersey said, if it's all in park, you're not going to get that back. So the preliminary view of staff is probably
if we went forward with an RDA, just hypothetically, we wouldn't go forward with an RDA in a park. We'd go forward with an RDA encouraging commercial to redevelop. I mean, that's the whole point.
Or a density high enough that the return and taxable value generates something for the payback. And the hard part, to be honest with you, is when you're dealing with residential, what are you the school district, what do they generally believe is being generated? Students.
Yeah.
And depending on that generation of students depends on it really how much they want to participate in what level and how long. And so residential is the harder RDA selling to the taxing entity. Does that explain it, Art?
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that the other question I had is, did we get any response from the church as far as why they are not here, or any kind of formal response on their thoughts?
I've not heard anything other than what I expressed to the planning commission earlier.
And I've received no communication.
Followed up a bit further. I was hoping that they would be here. They were invited.
Yes.
The last communication was that they'd be willing to consider participation in some public-private work that would create a buffer between them and residential or commercial, either one.
Okay.
I am very conflicted. I feel like I have kind of gone all over the map in terms of what I want here based on listening to the community, based on listening to the owners. On one hand, we have evidence that our city is underparked, and we know that it is underparked. And so my vision going into this process would be to see as large of a park as we could put there, with the expectation that if a park is going to go in there, I want to see our citizens be willing to put their money where their mouth is. It's easy for citizens to come up and say, we would really love a park, but I don't expect my property owner to just eat the cost of that, right? So I've always fully expected that, exactly, and it's not fair to the property owner. And but before we got rid of the park idea, I wanted to develop it to an extent that the city could go out to residents and say, okay, you've told us that you want a park. We think a park would be really great there. Are you willing to pay for it? Because if the answer that we got back from our citizens was overwhelmingly, well, we'd really love a park, but we don't want to pay for it, then we can take the park option off the table and move forward with something else. The conflict that I have is that I am also very sensitive to the timing issues that the property owner has right now. And in listening to this process, I mean, I've also heard a lot of conflicting opinions from the community. I mean, I have heard people like Sue Weiniger, who has said, you know, I really want to find some affordable housing for young couples that are starting out, for people who are downsizing. We want to be able to stay in this community. But I have also heard feedback from a number of residents that essentially say, but we really don't want change. Now that we're here, right, we don't want to open the door to allow any more type of higher density housing, because that will change the character of what we have. And so we are fine just staying just as the city is, and we don't want to open the door. Because, I mean, you know, they don't really, their priority is not allowing younger homes or younger families or retired individuals to come in. And so there's a real conflict there. I have heard from a number of citizens who really, ideally, they would really love to just put a single home on a quarter-acre lot, right? And that's their vision. And anything that doesn't fall within that spectrum is not acceptable. And I think that that is simply not viable. I mean, if we were talking about a Lund Lane that was a completely empty property, maybe we could look at something different. But I think that Taylor Spendlove makes a good point, and one that we have discussed on a number of occasions here at this commission, is that we are dealing with redevelopment. And as Corey likes to point out to us, that means that we're not going to get quarter-acre lots with nice homes that sit on those little single quarter-acre lots. And I know that I have been a broken record, but I live on a nice house on a nice street, and I'm not on a quarter-acre lot. I'm in medium-density housing. And right now our zoning code would prohibit me from building my house on my street. So I get that there's that conflict. And I have also had people that have said to me, I will say it very clearly, I have had people say to me that I'd rather see that property just sit there and deteriorate than puts in higher density housing. And I sit here and I'm a little impassioned about this tonight because I've heard that comment. And I sit here and I think that that's not fair to my property owner, who is sitting here telling me that that is their livelihood and that they have astronomical property costs and that it costs them a full year's worth of income just to repair a roof. And it's not fair to somebody to say, hey, great, property owner, you can let your property sit there and you have to deal with how to figure out how to pay for the property taxes for that property. So I'm all over the map on this one, because in an ideal world, what I would really, really love to do is still throw out this park idea to our citizenry and say, okay, are you willing to pay for it? Because if you're willing to pay for it, you need to pay these property owners what the market value is of this property. Are you willing to do it? And if the answer is no, then I think that the next best use is clearly, I mean, I think that there's got to be some residential there. I'm not suggesting that we just turn the whole thing into a park. So I think that there needs to be some residential there. And it sounds like to me that this corner property is a viable commercial piece. And I'd like to see, again, the largest park that we could put there, assuming that people want to pay to support it. Because if they don't want to pay to support it, then I think that we need to look really hard at homes. And then the question is, again, what density do people support, right? And do we want to allow, I know, I say 8 and people shudder. Do we want to go 6? Or do we want to go 8 and try to put in a nicer, bigger, public, private green space area? And so I don't know what to do with this one, because I want my cake and eat it too, right? I want to explore the park idea, but I don't want to prejudice this property owner, because they do have rights. And I think that there is it's always a tension on the planning commission. I don't think people in the public really appreciate how difficult it is to try to balance public opinion versus property owner rights, because frequently you're never going to please everyone. I mean, and we try to do our best, but we're also citizen planners, and we're also trying to look beyond just what the next 5 years is going to bring. We are trying to look down the road 20 and 30 years into the future and say, what do we want here in this area for this community? And so I still sit here conflicted. I'm not sure what to do.
Hey, Corey, I know you have a law degree, but I've just now give you an honorary planning degree because this is everything about planning.
So Corey, maybe to help with Shaylin's grief over there. I mean, ultimately, the task at hand here, Corey, is we're talking about general plan, right?
Correct.
And a revision or not of the language of the general plan for this area.
Correct.
And remind me, the city council is ultimately responsible for approving the final language of this general plan, or we are?
Correct, the city council.
City
You'll
council.
recommend language to put in this neighborhood plan.
So I think at a minimum, we need to have a few different kind of options for what we want that language to be, and we can either vote on what our favorite is, or could we, would the city council hate us for this, give them a ranked list of, this is our preferred general plan language, if not this, you know.
I think you can approach it the way you want. I mean, I even think you could say, no, let's get narrowed down to this is the alternative that we vote majority on. And that's certainly simple in the sense of sending up a single recommendation. I think another hybrid is that a general plan can have options. So consider this, but if that fails, this is where we go. I also think that you could create a couple of versions and alternatives as they stand separately, because you determined that those values are two different values, and now they decide what value and preference they want. This is general plan visioning, and it's unlike where you're trying to pass, is it a 12-foot setback or is it a 10-foot? Let's do an option. You know, this is something you can recommend some options, and you can approach it as it's segregated, or is it something that can be alternatives inside the plan.
Great. So then I think maybe what I'd like to do is have us kind of decide on 3, 4, 5 different scenarios that we maybe direct staff to come up with some language, and we can vote on those and say, this is what we want to do. And then we can even...
We'll go back and modify or
modify,
combine some together
exactly,
into
that's what I'm
alternatives.
saying, generate a hybrid of them or something like that, because I think we've had a lot of discussion about it. I think it's now maybe time to put the pen to the paper and get going on it. So.
Is it possible, Corey, in connection with making this determination, to send out some type, I'm not even thinking in the mail, I'm thinking, come on, we're in 2017, we have access to technology. Can we put together some type of a poll that people could, I would really love to hear feedback from the community and from the community at large, right? Not just the southern part of Centerville City, because if we are gonna look at a park as an option, that's gonna affect everyone in the city. I would love to put together something that we could get really reasonably fast feedback on, so that we can act quickly, but put out there something that, break it down by how much per household, per whatever would be required to purchase an acre of land versus 2 acres of land versus 3 acres of land, and say, are you willing to raise your property taxes X to pay for this park? Because maybe if we get some really pretty quick feedback from people in this community, and it's overwhelmingly, boy, we love the idea of a park, but we don't want to pay for it, then I think that is easier for us to take off the table. I don't want to give up on this park idea yet, with the full expectation that people would pay for that property. I don't expect the city to get it for free.
Does Centerville City
Up there.
property
Yeah, do you want to?
across the freeway? How much properties do they have as a city? I mean,
As far as in the
Centerville's
city
not just
boundary?
this little
Yeah, there's some.
triangle.
Oh, yeah, there's quite a bit of property
So
in the
growth-
city boundary west of the freeway. I can
Growth
take
will
you,
happen.
I can
And
take you to,
so parks can be there. The smaller or the higher density homes could be, it will probably happen. This area could go to the less density, this property we have. And I mean, you have a higher density over a few blocks from McDonald's on the old highway. And it's a beautiful community.
Let me interrupt. I'm talking with Brighton Homes, and with where you're going with this, we're giving up. We're going back to Dirk and I are going to try to rent, and you're just too much all over the board. We can't wait. So I mean, you're wasting. We're wasting your time. Yeah, if you've got to ask residents, we've got to go to Bridge Church and apologize and hope that they don't build that building. And, if you can't give them that 6 or 8 that they need, let's forget it. and we'll just keep trying. We'll just keep plugging away.
Well, appreciate that comment, but understand that we can't, we're not in a position right now to adopt.
And I understand that, but if you're not going to present that for an approval, please, can you explain what you're...
I just think...
Let me make a comment first before you do, just so that you know where we're coming from. The comment that Kevin just made, Commissioner Daly just made, I think is the path we have to take, which is essentially to direct staff to present to us language that we can then debate and recommend to the City Council. And it may be in the alternative, it may be a general plan proposal that has options to it that the City Council can consider. But the very best thing that we can do as a planning commission is to have staff come back with exact language that we can then adopt and recommend as a planning commission. It still will have to go to the City Council. It will still have to go through the City Council process. So no matter what we do tonight or at our next meeting, when this language is presented to us, we're still looking at least a month away. So if what you're telling us is that the deal's off the table if we don't act tonight, the answer is we can't act tonight.
Well, it's not that. It's confusing. You're not coming together.
So
well, we thought you'd been down the public process and you got the surveys, and I understand what you're saying. You'd like to get involved the whole city because everybody will need to vote on a tax increase to pay for the park. But I think by the time we really get to those steps and really we get to a final approval, it's likely next summer, and they're not going to wait around for that.
Well, and just
yeah.
in response to that, I appreciate Shaylin's comment, and we haven't decided as a commission that we for sure are going to do that. I was actually trying to respond and say that we have a property tax increase that has just occurred. I think everyone on this commission knows I am pro-park. I've said that probably plenty times. And paying for the park, not stealing it, but paying for the park. And possibly having some other residential or something, but I'm pro a park. I mean, I've said that many times. But going back to the public who we've heard from, having them just recently vote or hearing through this property tax increase, I'm going to take Corey's side, and he's going to be surprised about it, but I think we should just make a decision and send it up to the planning commission and not try to figure out how to pay for it, I guess, which is against what I've said before, because as I've gone through this process and as I've looked at these hypotheticals that Corey has said and looked at what's been happening in the city with the property tax increase and with the cemetery, I think we have exhausted this to a point where we need to make some decisions, and we can reasonably take up a few options up to the city council and say, look, we want this if the citizens will pay for it. We don't know yet, but we think they will, or maybe we don't. We don't really know, but that's your job. So you're going to go ahead and figure that out, right? So that's just a respectful disagreement with going forward with the public process, just because it does slow the process down. And we have gone to the public, and I feel like we kind of can distill it down to a few options, even though we know we aren't quite sure what exactly would happen or how exactly it'll be paid for. We can say residential, we can say park and residential, we can say park, we can say whatever it is that we want to say, and take it up to them and say, okay, there you go.
And that's all we're asking. We just want to bring it to a vote as quickly as possible. So we'd appreciate that.
I understand that. Can I clarify my comment? Because I think that people have taken it differently than what I intended. I recognize that, first off, I am one person amongst a 7-member planning commission, and my 6 colleagues may very well disagree with me, so I am simply one voice in this. My second comment with regard to involving the public is that while we have asked the public about this, we have never given them numbers in terms of what the cost would be. And so I was envisioning not something that would drag out the process. I was thinking about doing some type of an online survey where we could get instant feedback, or pretty as close to instant feedback as we as a government body can get, to run it concurrently with our decision. So my idea in sending that out would not only help us, but as Becky explains, I mean, we recommend a change that will be made, but we don't make that final call. That's the city council. And so if we propose a park, and I think that you're right, Becky. I mean, I actually do listen to Corey too. I think that we need to look at it as here's what we want. But ultimately, to be realistic, I think that is something that the city council would look at. And so my idea in sending that out would be not to slow down the process. It would be in order to assist the city council, because the last thing you want to do is to have us put up 3 options to the city council and then have the city council say, but will the people support this one? We don't know. Maybe we should get some more feedback from the citizens. So my idea in that is to streamline the process, not to slow it down, because if that is, and yeah, maybe I'm wrong, right? I'm a pie in the sky kind of girl, and I'd really like to believe that people would support a park if push comes to shove. I suspect that if you were to ask most of the people in Centerville, they would probably say no, but we don't want to pay that much for it, right? Which would be then an easy way to remove that option, because then at least A, we've explored it, and then B, people, we as planners, we try to look down the road, but we also want to get buy-in from the community as well. We don't want to just jam anything through that people are going to really dislike. So when we involve the public in this decision, then people, if they come back later and say, oh my gosh, but why didn't we do a park? We can then say, you know what, we talked a lot about it, and we sent out a survey, and here's what people were leaning towards or not towards. So you get more buy-in to what the project is going to be.
But in the meantime, we're going to extend leases, and it's not going to be available anyway.
Understood. And as Dave Hershey points out, I mean, we can't make a decision tonight. We can only move forward just as quickly as we can. Right. So I still think that it would be worth, I mean, regardless of what the Weinigers decide to do with their property, I still would like to get that feedback from the community so that we can look at it and we can also send it up to the city council, because I think that information will be helpful for the city council.
Always trying to balance everybody and accommodate their things. First of all, the statement's correct. We still need to bring back some language to you regardless of what's taking place. No, I know you know that. I'm just setting the parameters for that. We still have to bring back some language. That's going to take another meeting or 2 to get that final language. So in reference to how long their patience, it's still, they're going to have to be patient or decide to move on. That's really the cut and dry of the situation. Now, understanding their emotions of time and understanding your desire, I can say the reality check would be is that the city council has an media policy. And so it's not something that we can just go out and generate a Twitter account or a Facebook post and start generating that input. I would have to, in my mind, to accommodate the request was I can begin to prepare some language with the scenarios that you want, at the same time discuss with the city manager and the mayor the media policy and see if the council is interested in allowing such communication to take place. And then, depending on that response, coming back with that language that would clarify about where we're probably at in being able to do a quick turnaround with a Survey Monkey or something of that nature.
I think that would be great. I think that would be additional information that would really help the city council, because if we as a commission decide that we want to include a park as an option, I do want to try to streamline this as fast as reasonably possible, right? I think that we should act with reasonable haste in coming to a decision.
And what I'm thinking in my mind is depending on the response, again, I can't promise anything, the strategy of an initial reach out, that's always difficult because they're really kind of unscientific, polls that you go on, but still it gives a temperature. That's the best way. It gives a temperature. I think I know their concerns and your concerns. I think those can align fairly close together to a final draft of a language.
I would like to see that language, and I would love to hear from my other fellow commissioners, because maybe I'm off in the night.
But you are one that says maybe no, it's not worth it. So the other
Right,
commissioners
so,
have
you
to
know, I would
decide.
love to hear what other people think about this idea, because maybe I'm alone over here on the end.
Can I just make one comment? Sorry.
Please.
Sorry, Mr. Hershey. And you guys are awesome, and we really appreciate how much you care. But having done this for 20 years with a lot of different cities, I think from our perspective, the notices have gone out, the public knows, it's been in the Clipper, it's all over the place. If they really wanted a park, this place would be filled with park wanters. But they're not here, and they've known about it. The community knows. You guys have had 8 meetings on this that we've attended, at least that, and they don't want a park. And the people that did respond, it was a very small sample, and I just, from our perspective, it doesn't feel fair, it doesn't feel right. We just deserve a yay or nay based on the merits of our request, and let's move forward, because I think we feel like we have the votes with the city council. We feel pretty confident with that after talking to them a lot. We just want to get past you guys after all this deliberation and just get to a vote so we can move forward with our business, or they can move forward with theirs.
Well, to be
It's just-
fair,
yeah.
when we did have our open house, we did hear pretty strongly that a lot of people wanted the park, and those people, that was advertised to a different group than what was
But
advertised
there
to
were
this
like
group
15
tonight, right?
people that came. I was here the entire night.
No, there were a lot more than that. But the other
15
thing
groups.
is,
It wasn't much more than that.
but the other thing is that, you know, to be fair, part of the reason why we've been so deliberate about this whole issue is that density especially is a hot button item in this city, and it has been for certainly 2 summers now, and going back probably 20 plus years, right? Then people move to Centerville and they don't leave, so they have long memories, and so they remember all these conversations, and so it's definitely a thing that is a lot of people feel very passionate about, and so that's part of the reason why we have taken the time to analyze this situation, get the public's input on multiple different angles, and so that we make sure that we don't do, you know, what Shaylin talks about and just ram something down people's throats. It's something that people in the city feel very passionately about, and even though they're not packing this room here, that doesn't mean that, you know, we're not hearing stuff elsewhere and hearing stuff, you know, different ways. And so, you know, we have been very deliberative about this on purpose, and I think that's a good way to go instead of just kind of doing something. And also, you know, as far as this goes, we're talking about general plan, which is the long-term planning for stuff. As far as your specific request, you know, we already did give a yes or no answer to that, and the city council did as well, I think. So, you know, that's a different type of an issue altogether. So, anyway.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to propose that we direct staff to take what you've heard tonight and come up with some alternatives for us to debate and consider and ultimately decide on as soon as we can. And I would propose something along the lines of a general plan that involves residential and the possibility of commercial along 4th East, with residential being of sufficient density to enable us to look at the possibility of a green space park in the area as well, which in my view would probably be 6 to 8.
Which kind of looks like the 3 that are up there. I mean,
Yeah,
sort of, right?
kind of looks like maybe a combination of
Well,
2 and 3.
The only thing I would maybe add to that is that some type of, maybe I'm misinterpreting some of this, but different kind of, here's one option for how the general plan looks like, or this, you know, different paragraphs, right? And one of the paragraphs, one of the options should be essentially leave it as commercial, right? That's one. That's your base. That's your whatever, null hypothesis. And the other ones would be some of these.
Does anyone want to leave it? I mean, do you feel strongly to leave it as? I don't know that I feel a burning desire to leave it commercial. We've heard from them that leaving it commercial I mean, they're working on trying not to leave it commercial.
Well, being sensitive to what we heard from our open house and the comments, the emails, the notes and stuff, that was one of the options that seems like people said.
But
so whether or not that's whether or not that's the road we decide to go down, I think that's something that we should at least consider.
I would be
I don't
opposed.
I don't want to.
Let me tell you why I would be opposed to that. Because I recognize that people would like commercial. There are some people that would like commercial there, but all of the evidence that we have seen has been that commercial is simply, keeping that entire area there as commercial is simply not viable. And I think that people rely on us as a body to do that research and come up with that determination. And so that would, given that I don't think that that's a viable option, I would not be inclined to make it an all-commercial option to send up to the city
And
council.
also remember that we have to advertise it for the public input and a hearing, the language, so those who are opposed to anything that's being proposed still have a chance to voice.
Yeah, I would also think, I think that it hasn't proven to be viable. I also think that we need to zero down on maybe 2 options to send to the city and not say, okay, here's 7 different options, you guys decide.
Well,
I think we've analyzed this a long time and really have a feel for reality.
I don't think
in
I was ever saying send 7 to the city council, but at most we would send 3. I think that we would need to narrow it down to, here's our favorite. And if you guys don't like this one, then this is the next best option or something like that. Because this, as you know, the city council disagrees with us frequently, right? And so I think we need to be prepared for that we send our favorite thing and they say no. And it would also help to speed up the process if we can say, pick this one, if not this one, then this one. That would save the process from having to come back and having us do it all over again, right?
I personally would like to see it down to 2 options that we give them to. We say, this is what we think is viable. Either of these, we'd like to see this. It's in your court.
And I think if we're going to send 2, we send one that is maybe totally realistic. You know, I think we know that a 3-acre park is maybe beyond what the city can afford. We may not get the citizen support to pay for that. But what is that public-private feature that would be realistic, and then maybe do the pie-in-the-sky park as the other one?
Well, and the thing, the only reason why I think commercial is not a thing to send up is that is what it is right now. So there's no point in us really saying, change it to be what it is right now, kind of, right? Like, I feel like.
Wouldn't that just be the do nothing option?
Yeah.
We don't
we
make
could,
a change?
Yeah, that would just,
that's what I was
and
saying.
I feel like
That's
they
your
would,
baseline, right?
Yeah,
I feel like they would
if
say
you're trying to get
that.
at.
They would say, nah, we're doing nothing. I mean, that's an obvious sort of.
But that's not planning.
That's what I'm saying. So that's what I'm saying. So I feel like that's what it is right now. That's kind of the baseline of what they would say if they didn't want anything. So to me, it seems like, why muddy it up with that? Let's just go with 2 or 3 that are like, this is what we want.
Great.
Move forward type of thing.
Let me ask a question. Is there anyone on this commission that thinks that that corner piece where the dry cleaner is now should be anything other than commercial? I mean, do we because I look at that piece and say, that's a pretty vibrant commercial piece. And I think it looks like it's going to stay a pretty good, vibrant commercial piece. Is there anyone who feels different about that?
Well, it does seem weird that you would surround it on all 4 sides with residential and then it's sitting right there.
Yeah.
And to that point, we keep hearing over and over again, commercial's not viable, and yet we heard tonight that corner is doing well, and we've heard in the past that Ace is doing well. And so it's like, well,
Well, that's what I was going to say in response. I would actually say, the reason why I don't love the 3rd option is because I actually would like to see commercial going that whole length of 400 on that, because I think that would take in Ace and the current, do you know what I mean? Like having it instead of a box, more of a rectangle, personally.
But it leaves a pretty good chunk.
But that's still, that's still a chunk of commercial.
East of Ace, though, that's not.
But I feel like that could possibly.
In your language for the general plan, I mean, it is general. It talks about, we prefer residential with green space, but that commercial where viable is still allowed. And perhaps we don't draw the map right now. We don't have to draw the map.
No, we don't have to draw the map.
We can't draw the map right now.
We can put in the language of transitions, that if there is a rezone of residential and it's in some type of general configuration, it has to accommodate what the commercial is doing, and a future transition to that, if that ever transitions along with it. I mean, there shouldn't be language that says all or nothing. It's got to address the timing of the transition along with it.
Right.
So what are we directing staff to? What do we want them to write up?
Well, I'm option 4.
I've heard that. I
I'm in
understand that
option 4.
one.
You got option 4?
I do understand
I
that.
want option 4 to be one of them.
I like option 4.
So-
I'm in agreement.
So spell out option 4 one more
Okay,
time.
Option 4 would be retain commercial where viable, that residential would be the preferred use of the other space with sufficient density so as to enable some viable green space, i.e.
Do you have a
of some size?
Yeah,
Do you have a minimum?
I don't think I think staff would work on what we would
Yeah,
recommend.
you'll come up with the language, but
Yeah.
that's the concept.
Do you have a
These
minimum?
scenarios are not the cut and dry.
No,
This is
that's
just
the
trying to
concept.
visualize.
And
do you want
where,
to button
where,
down
Dave, would you,
Sufficient.
where are you believing that commercial is viable for purposes
Possibly
of that
along
instruction?
Northeast.
That east end.
So the whole strip of that east side?
Yeah, I mean, that's where it is now.
Yeah,
And it's property that we really can't.
okay.
Can't touch. right?
Even if we rezone it right now, it's gonna stay commercial for as long as people are there, so I don't see why we shouldn't include
So do we-
reality in your plan.
So can we direct staff to do essentially 2, 3, and 4? Is that sufficient?
Well,
Well,
I still think.
I say
I'd
2
go
and 4.
3 and 4.
I'm with Kevin. I would do 2, 3, and 4.
Don't we want some choices, some options? I mean,
But I also really want a park. I think the highest best use is a park. I know that's annoying. I know everyone hates me when I say that.
but we're getting down to
I don't hate
reality.
you.
We don't hate you, but I
We
just,
won't
I just
ever
think
get
that
pie in the
it's,
sky if we don't shoot for it.
I look at it and say, if we send 2 or if we send 3, I don't think that it will ultimately matter, because the city council is going to do what it believes
Yes.
is best there anyway. So for purposes of advancing the ball, I would support options 2, 3, and 4, as Dave has articulated
Yeah,
it.
we could have language
Can we
for
switch
2.
3 to be, I guess 3 could be 4. 3, you're just saying 4 is kind of like,
I'm
what's the difference in 4?
Four is a smaller park.
4 is just a smaller park.
well, then I don't like that.
Well, you can vote against
vote
it
on
when
it.
it comes to it.
Can we
but-
keep 3 except for just put the commercial use all along 400?
Yeah, we're
Well,
not.
again,
we're
the
not
general
defining
language-
Yeah,
where
I'm
it
going to
is.
have to
Yeah.
write it up. I'm just getting what's your framework you want me to work with, and then I can go from there.
I would
I
say
am okay with
2,
3
3, and 4
options.
to present to the commission, and then we discuss it, debate it, and decide
Okay.
which ones we want to send up.
I agree.
And-
Let's get the language.
Let's
in
do it.
place
Yeah,
first.
and for the record, I would be fine taking that whole commercial strip down 400 East, given that Ace Hardware is there and that
Me
it
too.
is
Me
pretty
too.
existing, vibrant commercial.
Maybe you could just eliminate the one with the little square,
Yeah.
Yeah.
if everyone's in agreement.
Turn the 3 to
Stretch it out.
Yeah.
to a rectangle.
Yeah, these hard lines will go away with the language.
Okay.
The language has got to be more general. So,
So
does
what's
that
a
give you enough
time frame?
direction?
Yes,
But
that
does
gives
that-
me enough direction. Now the timing issue, your next agenda is pretty full.
That's all right. You got all.
Time in the world.
We got to do this.
I think that we
So
we
what-
gotta do
We
this.
gotta
gotta
do it.
do
We gotta
this.
do it.
Yeah, so what I can do is propose the language in draft, but not schedule the hearing on that.
Right.
And then come back to the second meeting after, so that you're familiar with the language, can make any adjustments,
I think-
recommendations, adjustments, and then we'll post the following planning commission meeting for the public hearing, and you can go from there.
What if we want to vote on it next time, though? I think just do the public hearing just in case, right?
You're going to have a long meeting.
Yeah.
I know.
You'll have a lot of comments.
I'm not going to be here.
Ah.
Just so you know.
Wait,
I really am not
what
going to
day
be
is
here
it?
next.
Is it the 20th?
next meeting?
I think
What day is it?
Well,
I'm not going to be here either.
we can,
Is it the 19th?
let's bring it to a motion so that we can get something on the table. I move that we ask staff to bring
Oh, I'll be
back
here.
language that essentially deals with 2, 3, and 4, as we've discussed tonight, with the idea that it be presented to the commission first for review and discussion before it's finalized for publication and for a public hearing. That's my motion. An alternative
I'll second.
to that. Okay, thank you. An alternative to that would be Becky's comment, which is hold a public hearing at the same time. Welcome.
I just think we might as well just do it for public hearing, and if we want to vote that night, we could, and we don't have to. We could say we're not ready to vote for it until next time. I don't know.
You can do that.
I think out of consideration to the poor property owners, we need to do that, even if it is a late night.
Right.
That's fair.
Okay.
We've already frustrated them beyond.
I'll withdraw my motion. You want to make a new one?
I was good with your motion.
No, we'll just amend your, I would vote to amend your motion and include a public hearing on the next agenda, which it makes it long, but, yeah.
And I'll second.
Okay. Vote on the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion in chief that we direct staff to prepare the scenarios or the language for the general plan amendment based on our discussion tonight, and that we schedule a public hearing the same night.
Okay.
I'll second that, but then I have a question, Corey. So we schedule the public hearing that way, and then if we make any changes, we don't have to redo a public hearing, right?
Yeah, we do.
No, you're now modifying it according to what you want, but I got to check the public hearing and the noticing and make sure we can meet it all, so.
Okay.
But I mean, at best, we're having a public hearing, not at our next meeting, but in the meeting after, because don't we have to notice it for,
You have to notice it longer for a
yeah,
general
more
plan.
than 2 weeks?
Well, we've already noticed this process, so I've got to get with Lisa and see how that notice influences what I can do for the meeting.
Okay.
Because we've already done some noticing for the general plan change, and so I just need to make sure that we comply with the Open Meetings Act. So I will do my best to put it on the 23rd, consult with Lisa, and make sure that that previous noticing is covering it.
Okay, fair enough. With that caveat, any other debate? Let's go ahead and take a roll call vote on the motion, Chief.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you.
And Chair, I'm going to have to leave. I have a previous engagement, so.
Okay, we won't
An
get your
appointment at
comments.
9:30?
I had an appointment at 9:30, but I told them 9:45, so I'm sorry. I have
Just,
to leave.
if I may address the audience since they have
Sure.
an interest.
Goodbye.
We've noticed this in the past, and it's been a while, and so I need to get with our city attorney to make sure that the 23rd still meets the Open Meetings Act for hosting a public hearing. If it doesn't, then I have to go back to the paper, and that would bump it to that second meeting anyway, just so you know.
Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. We do need to go over our minutes for the meeting of.
Chair
Joel.
Hershey,
Yes.
before we proceed, I still, and I might be the only one, but nobody else has said yay or nay on this. I still think that it would be nice to, as part of this process, get public weigh-in on the larger park and to know whether people are willing to pay for it or not. Because if the answer is no, then I think that would be helpful for the city council to know one way or the other.
Shaylin, do you feel like you have confidence in the city council as the elected representatives to represent that?
That's what I was going to say. I think that we leave it to them. I mean, they're going to hear about it, and especially if, hopefully we'll get this to them relatively soon, and then if people don't like that, then we have an election coming up. So,
Okay, then can we make a recommendation to the city council to know that this issue is coming on the up, and if they believe that that would be helpful for them, so that at their next city council meeting, they can make that decision as to whether it would be helpful or not. I think they're not going to know that this is coming up unless, I guess, if they're listening tonight, hi. But if not, it would be helpful to let them know that is something that we think that could be helpful, and that they could help streamline the process if they wanted to get it in the works. And maybe ultimately you're right. I mean, maybe they are the better body to do that. And if they agree that that's a great idea, fantastic. And if they don't, then maybe they don't need that type of input to make the decision.
So,
but
so for clarification, would you, from your position, would you rather see that be part of when you make a recommendation on the general plan that they do that, or was that something you wanted sooner to see if they would entertain that idea?
So given the options that we've put on the table, I mean, one of the options is going to be the larger park. So I think that that's already on the table. So I'm okay without having that feedback for our meeting, but I just want to raise the issue with them so that if they feel that it is a good idea, that they can get that process in the works so that it might help them make their decision. And again, if they conclude that that type of a survey wouldn't be helpful, then they don't need to do it.
So what I would do, if you're okay with it, Dem, is I'll just include in the staff report when we go through the process, the general plan language, I'll write up a motion that does that, and then the group can decide whether that motion goes forward with it or not, rather than try to debate that merits tonight, if you're okay. Because I'm just saying, think about it, because if we're not trying to get immediate return, let everybody think about it as you make a final recommendation, and whether you want to include that in a separate motion to go do this first before you make your final decision.
I guess,
what I'm saying?
Sort of. My idea was, now I'm reframing how I was originally thinking about it, because initially I was thinking it would be helpful for us, and I think I've been persuaded by Becky's comments about that that's not our role, but I think that it still would be helpful for the city council. So I'm just saying I would like to raise this in whatever mechanism is appropriate to get this idea before the city council as soon as possible, whatever that mechanism is, so that the city council can decide if that type of feedback is helpful.
When you make your final recommendation, you make a recommendation on the general plan language, and then I would provide an opportunity for a second motion to be debated, and whether you forward as a group that directive to them. Unless you want to decide you're committed to that directive tonight.
Well, we could probably pass a resolution of the commission recommending that the city
consider
obtaining a survey input as to whether the citizens would be willing to pay for the park. The only problem is we don't know if that's a recommendation we're going to send up.
Yeah, that's true. I'm just trying to streamline the process to the best.
That's why I'm waiting for the final draft language to come, because if it includes some component, then you can send that message out.
Okay, maybe I'm putting cart before horse.
Yeah, I would wait until we send up something. We're prepared to send up something to the city council. The survey could happen pretty quickly, but I would say that it would be nice, Corey, if staff could investigate the parameters of the city with regard to the surveying and make sure that it's all good to go.
Yeah, and you don't need to do a motion for that. I'll just respond to that.
So maybe just a directive on the minutes tonight to the staff to make sure that the process is ready to go if we do make that decision.
Okay, we can do that.
You okay with that, Sherry?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Great.
I'm just trying to be sensitive to the property owner's desire to get this thing up.
It would be helpful to have that information, but we better wait until we decide what we're going to send.
Fair point.
Okay. Let's go to the minutes then. July 26, 2017. Anything on page 1? Page 2. I have a couple of things. Line 3. I just circled parking teams. That's probably what he said. Does that mean that people are standing out kind of directing traffic?
I think that's exactly what he meant. Yep.
Okay. All right. Then on line 23, where we were talking about the parking for all churches is calculated using assembly space. And I made the point of, does that include the cultural halls in LDS chapels and other chapels that, or other churches that have expandable assembly space, if you will? Yeah. So I would like to add the language assembly space, which in most cases includes expanded space such as cultural halls. And then the last comment I had on page 2 was on line 38. This is Commissioner Hurst's comment, so I won't put words in your mouth, but I think there is a question mark after Sunday morning.
Yes.
Because it's framed in, as a question. Anything else on page 2?
I had a couple of just minor nits here. On line 2, well, like starting back on line 1, it says Brent Peterson said he was representing Lauren Pankratz because he, and I think that could arguably be ambiguous. So I would simply change Lauren Pankratz to say the applicant, and then where it says because he, then insert Lauren Pankratz. So it would read, Brent Peterson said he was representing the applicant because Lauren Pankratz was stuck in traffic. So it's clear that who the he is.
If you do that, then in line 6, where we say the applicant said it is between 60 and 90 cars, it's not the applicant, it's
Brent Peterson.
Yeah, it's Mr. Peterson.
Mr. Chair, excuse me just for a second. Just need to use the restroom.
Sure. Put that on the public record.
Oh, you know what? Never mind, because then we're gonna have to make that change throughout that whole paragraph. I'm okay leaving it as it was. So scratch that comment. On line 32.
And mine as well.
A good point. I wasn't looking at that part. On line 32, I'd put an and between motion and the word likes. Commissioner, and I don't mean to put words in Commissioner Johnson's mouth, but so it will read, Commissioner Johnson said he is in favor of the motion and likes the idea.
Well, but then you've got a compound
No, hold on,
sentence.
wait, I know. But this was a really long sentence, so I broke it up.
Oh, okay.
Mixed use in the area, period. Take out the and, capitalize because, and then you've just broken that long sentence into 2 separate sentences, which read really long to me. And then on line 36, I believe just as a grammatical issue, the comma should be after asked, not application. That's it.
Okay. I would take exception to leaving the word because
Where?
in there, starting a sentence with a preposition.
What?
So
No.
I would probably say he also, he noted that the uses are different on.
Dave, I would like to point out that it is a progressive writing style to start with prepositions, and that it is now appropriate to start sentences with because and, as long as it's not overdone.
I will concede. I'm just not a very progressive guy. Okay, we can change it to because.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
Which kills me.
It's getting late.
All right, that's it. That's all I got.
Thank you. Anybody else on page 2? All right, page 3. I have one comment. It's on lines 37 and 38. The sentence beginning, he said he is excited for marrying Kathy, and his garage is almost complete. At the end of that sentence, really kind of is just hanging there. I think he may have said it just this way, but it would read better to say, he said his garage is almost complete, and he is excited for marrying Kathy to get their garage built.
Yeah. That's better.
And then on line 41, it may have been me making the motion, but I don't think I made that motion, and I don't know who did. I'm okay leaving it the way it is, but it's not my recollection. I think it was you.
Was it me?
I don't
I have to go back and watch the video.
Could you just check on that, on the video from the last one to see who actually made the motion? Because I don't think on line 41 it was me. But I'm happy to be there.
It could have been me. I don't know.
I thought it was you. Okay, anything else on page 3? Page 4? Page 5. Page 6.
The only change I'd make is on line 31 to take out the period, just because we haven't put periods on any of the other bullets.
Catch. Page 7. Page 8. Oh, I thought it was interesting on page 8 that in line 15, he cautioned against presenting the numbers to interested stakeholders because the estimates are preliminary, and then we publish the numbers. I'm not suggesting a change.
Yeah.
Anything else on page 8? Page 9?
Can I make one change to page 9? On line 35, it says Commissioner Heyman expressed her preference for a 3-acre neighborhood park, which is exactly what I said, but it was based on the preliminary proposals that Corey had prepared, which he had indicated were not set in stone. And so my point there was not necessarily that I wanted a 3-acre park per se. I just supported a larger neighborhood park. So I would like to revise that just to say our preference for a larger, or maybe just a large neighborhood park, because I don't know that I really had a preference as between 2.5, 3.5, 3. My comment was just meant to convey that I wanted a substantial sized park if we could get one. So
I think also line 35 into line 36, she said Commissioners Hurst and Daly shared their view in a previous meeting that the city is underparked. I don't know that I'm not going to speak for Kevin, but I don't know that I was saying the city was underparked. I think this is, once again, I just like the numbers printed, that the national standard is 10 acres per 1,000 people, and that with the current acreage we have, not including the mountainside, it's 3.35 acres per 1,000 people. I just think it's more important to just say these are the numbers. I don't know that I was weighing in on an opinion on that, just more presenting numbers so that we could consider that.
I definitely said that the city was underparked, but I don't know how you merge
would you
those
prefer
two.
me just to take you out of that and say she said?
Yeah, but
Commissioner
I don't
Daly?
care if I mean, yes, I would prefer to be taken out of that, but I would like those numbers to be included in the minutes, just so that we have them on the record that they were discussed.
Because they were in the previous.
They were in the previous.
Yeah, they were.
No,
in the
well,
previous
that's
record.
fine. So if you want to just take me out on that one, that's fine.
So it would just be Commissioner Daly shared his view.
Yeah.
I'd like to propose a change on line 43. The first half of that paragraph basically says it would really be great to take a holistic approach and get a committee and do a lot of committee work on this before we considered it. And then I basically countermand myself because there's a risk of delay. I'd like that sentence on line 43 to read, Chair Hershey cautioned, however, that there is a risk and delay that may be associated with committee work because property owners may not want to wait.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
I can get you language on that, Katie, if you'd like, or you got it? Okay. Anything else on page 9?
50 words a minute.
No, that's good.
On page 10? Thank you for your comments. Chair will entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the minutes as amended.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Community Development Director's report.
You've added some business, so we definitely have a meeting. Commissioner Helgeson, you indicated you'll be gone.
I will.
We'll still send you everything. We're not going to leave you out.
I know. If you're voting on this,
Love
I'm like,
to have you call
I'm
in.
going to be on the East Coast, so how late are you going?
You going to Boston?
No, actually to Tennessee and then to Louisiana to see my son.
Oh, well, have fun.
We're going to see the eclipse.
Oh, very good.
And then I will check with Lisa on how things were noticed. There's a little bit of doubt in me that we covered everything for the meeting, so I may have to come back to you with the original idea of showing language and doing a following meeting, but we'll do our best to add that. So it'll be a good night, and Lisa's not here, so we can assign her to bring the refreshments.
Okay, that sounds good.
We actually have 5 items six now.
6 now?
Because Don Youngwood's not on that list.
Okay. And then we did have to put in that we rescheduled Legacy Commons.
What?
To be rescheduled. And then you have the council report. They tabled the construction sales and service. You've probably seen some emails running around from me. I've had some interesting discussions, and I'll just let you enjoy the imagination of what they are. And the Bell property was denied, but they preliminary have been given an assignment to be on the council agenda again for reconsideration, but they may withdraw their request for that reconsideration. So we'll see how that plays out. Other than that, thank you for all your work, and I'm sorry I wore 2 commissioners out that they finally just screamed uncle and said, here you go, Corey.
Thank you, staff, for your good work. I thought it was an interesting, sometimes exciting meeting. Thank you, Shane.
I found myself sitting there wishing that we had started maybe with the property owners rather than ending with them. But I'm grateful that we were able to get so many in the community out to give their comments on it, and also to have the opportunity to talk to the stakeholders. I think that was really critical for our determination.
Yeah, I think there's a plus or minus either direction. Sometimes if you listen to the stakeholders, and the community feels unheard, so it's hit and miss either way.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks everyone. Anything else that anyone would like to say? If not, I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn.